Chapter 596. Arriving at the bottom of the library museum, Hong Fan led Chen Ong to hide in an alley on the side. He was just about to climb up when Chen Ong stopped him. This old curator isn't that simple. According to the information I received, he was able to open such a large museum in a backward and chaotic colonial country like Cairo not just because of his official status. In fact, everyone in Cairo knows that this museum is not to be messed with, so no one dares to do anything to it even though it's filled with ancient Egyptian relics. It's the mausoleum guards who took care of the trouble. Hong Fan felt that this was normal. The mausoleum guards certainly wouldn't rely on armed forces to conquer the world like in the original plot. In fact, as the deep-rooted local bullies here, their power was astonishing. A facade like a museum would certainly not be harassed by those lowly hooligans. But in some cases, the mausoleum guards can't help much. A few years ago, a group of roving bandits planned to loot this place overnight. They planned to do this and then go far away. Naturally, they wouldn't be afraid of anything. But after they snuck in, they disappeared in this museum, and at that time, only the old curator was inside. Chen Ong revealed a piece of information that he confirmed. Hong Fan also noticed the information contained in this information, and his expression changed. "You mean, this old curator's idea is troublesome?" Chen Ong and Hong Fan looked at each other, and they both had a plan in mind. Hong Fan said, "Since there is magic in the mummy world, there will naturally be a worldview that fits it. When we did Fan Xinhai's mission, we knew that if there is supernatural power in the current mission world, then the relationship between the plot characters we come into contact with will not be as simple as in the movies. Especially when we meet a small noble who has the bloodline of a knight, and when we meet someone from the Vatican, he knows magic. Since Imogen knows magic and magic, as the power left behind by the pharaoh to prevent his resurrection, it would be strange if he didn't have supernatural inheritance." Hong Fan already understood what Chen Ong meant and nodded. Hong Fan stuck to the outer wall of the museum. His fingertips that were clinging to the edge of the wall exerted some force, and he easily leaped over the top of the wall. His footsteps were as light and silent as a cat's. Chen Ong looked at his back, and there was a thoughtful look in his eyes. This technique is the assassin's footsteps from the Assassin's Creed. Falling from a high place won't cause too much damage, and there won't be any footsteps when moving stealthily. Hong Fan wasn't wearing his classic hoodie, but from his attire, it could still be seen that he was an agile type of attack that could deal a lot of damage when necessary. Although the soft armor increased the load, it also greatly increased his defense, which meant that he often had to engage in close combat with his enemies. The excellent design allowed the soft armor to minimize the impact on his body's agility. It could be seen that he relied on his dexterity and agility to fight. The footsteps that he revealed when he moved also showed that he had good frontal combat ability. All in all, the fighting style of an assassin was close to that of a swordsman. He was good at stealth combat, and in frontal combat, he relied on his footsteps and agility to avoid damage. Hong Fan still didn't know that Chen Ong could see so much from his attire. He quietly went to the window sill of the museum area, and with a light flick of the dagger in his right hand, he opened the window and flipped over. Chen Ong watched him enter the museum area, and he also pressed lightly on the stone wall. Like a nimble swallow, he attached himself to the eaves. Using his right hand, he absorbed the sound of the window opening and closing into his palm, and Chen Ong snuck into the museum from the second floor. With Hong Fan's agility, Chen Ong easily locked onto the curator's position. He hid in the shadows and observed everything. The curator's office was not small, and there was only one entrance and exit. The windows were tightly shut and the room was brightly lit. It did not give people like Hong Fan the slightest chance to sneak in. Seeing this, Chen Ong sighed inwardly. He knew all too well what kind of fighting style a professional like Hong Fan would use. Sure enough, with a soft sound of metal knocking, the curator, who was writing on the desk, suddenly became alert. He shouted, "Evelyn?" No one in the exhibition hall answered. The curator muttered to himself, "Evelyn should be sleeping. It's almost dawn now. It can't be those thieves again, can it?" The curator picked up the hardwood walking stick beside him and cautiously snuck out of the room. Hong Fan's shadow slowly fell behind the curator. His footsteps were abnormally agile, and when he was still, he seemed to blend in with his surroundings. Chun Ong recognized that Hong Fan had at least 3 sneak skills, and had learned an additional skill called chameleon. When he attacked, his attack was as fast as lightning, and he used the dagger hilt to hit the back of the curator's head. Stun the enemy so that they can't participate in combat for a while. But Hong Fan was still too careless. Chun Ong had never neglected the lapis lazuli eyes of the eagle statue beside him. When the curator picked up his walking stick, a thin layer of light appeared on the surface of its gemstone eyes. The dog-headed warrior stone statues standing beside him suddenly moved. They held spears and crossed to block Hong Fan's path of attack. The curator hurriedly ran a few steps to the front of a clay urn. He grabbed a handful of spice powder with his left hand and took out a papyrus book with his right hand. He shook it open and read, "Awaken the sleepers. Protect your master." As he spoke, he sprinkled the spice powder on the mummies in the coffins beside him. Suddenly, the eyes of the 2 stone statues, which were inlaid with obsidian, lit up with blue flames. As they became more agile, so did their intelligence in dealing with enemies. Hong Fan's right palm struck out with a thunderous boom, breaking the giant stone statue's arm and dropping it to the ground. But the curator was getting further and further away from him. In the sarcophagus between them, 2 withered mummies struggled to climb out. The salt-stained linen bandages were very tough, and Hong Fan's dagger couldn't do any damage to them. The old curator dragged his body as he ran, constantly summoning flies and locusts to attack Hong Fan's eyes. Finally, he steeled his heart and pushed a withered crocodile mummy to the ground. He used a spell to summon a small gust of yellow sand to block Hong Fan's vision. Escorted by another mummy, he fled out the door. When the curator took the opportunity to run out the door with the mummy, he saw someone blocking his way. "Go and kill them." The curator hurriedly pointed at the mummy. With a shattering sound, the curator's papyrus was shattered by a bullet. He turned around and used the curator's body to block the mummy's path of attack. Chun Ong calmly pulled the trigger so that the curator could hear the sound clearly. Without a word, the curator obediently raised his hand. By the time Hong Fan escaped the harassment and rushed out of the museum, Chun Ong was already collecting the curator's amulet. Chun Ong deftly removed the animal tooth necklace, a scarab specimen, a bronze dog statue, and a golden cobra bracelet from the curator's neck. "Hey!" The curator stopped him. "Don't touch that, okay? That's a gift from my daughter." Chun Ong waved the intricately crafted cobra bracelet in front of the curator, letting him see the distinct tiny scales on it. Then he asked, "Your daughter gave you a poisonous snake amulet as a gift?" He used 2 fingers to break the head of the cobra bracelet, letting the curator see the blue venom inside. Chapter 597. After Zhang Ziqiang returned from the Suez Canal Company, he saw Hong Fan squatting at the door with a gloomy face, smoking. He went up to pluck the cigarette butt and asked, "You're back so soon? Where's Dr. Chen?" "He's interrogating Curator Terence inside." Hong Fan touched the bruise on his face and said with a bitter smile, "Qiangzi, I've embarrassed myself today. I'm not even as good as a weak scientist." "What happened?" Zhang Ziqiang asked in a low voice. "Sigh. We went to catch Curator Terence, and it turned out that the curator was completely different from the one in the plot. He actually knew magic, and the museum was full of his puppets. He almost escaped. Then, it was Dr. Chen who caught him." Hong Fan gestured. "He only used a pistol. Isn't he a biological scientist? How does he know how to interrogate?" Zhang Ziqiang glanced into the room and asked. Hong Fan looked up. Yes. He didn't know how to interrogate, but he knew psychology, and he used what he learned. There were plenty of people to learn from in this prison. He found 2 prison guards who were good at it, and after 10 minutes, he did better than them. Now, he's still learning ancient Egyptian occultism, hieroglyphics, and sacrificial culture. I watched from the side as he spent 30 minutes getting information about the organization left behind by the priests of Imidin. After that, he asked about the culture and legends of the Gravekeeper tribe. At that time, I didn't understand a single thing. Then, when he learned hieroglyphics and ancient Egyptian from Terence, I couldn't understand a single word. After that, they were talking about magic and occultism, and I came out to smoke. Hong Fan took the cigarette but from Zhang Ziqiang's hand, took a deep drag, and blew out smoke rings. That Terence is also a PhD, who studies ancient Egyptian culture. What the hell can I do when 2 PhDs are discussing academics? It feels like they're discriminating against my education. Hong Fan threw the cigarette but at his feet and ground it back and forth with the sole of his shoe. Chen Ong, who was talking to Dr. Terence, seemed to sense something. He looked back at the door. The relationship between the two did not seem to be that of a kidnapper and a kidnapper. Dr. Terence was sitting on the sofa, fiddling with the collar around his neck. Chen Ong was sitting beside him. The two were drinking black tea like a pair of friends chatting. In fact, Dr. Terence wasn't just an expert in ancient Egyptian culture, he was also a master of Egyptian occultism. He had inherited the priest culture of the Gravekeeper tribe from the pharaohs, and had been studying ancient Egyptian scholarship for many years. He was already an internationally renowned master. This status allowed him to obtain even more ancient mysterious legacies. Although he didn't look like much, in fact, Terence was already the most powerful priest on the Gravekeeper's side. In today's occultism world, he was also a very powerful existence. Chen Ong was now a PhD in biology, but in fact, he was also very accomplished in Western occultism research. He was also one of the few wizards who could obtain the title of Grand Arcanist. Because of his identity, he couldn't show it in front of the Lord God, but it wasn't difficult for him to understand and learn from Dr. Terence's knowledge. Dr. Terence, I'm sorry to use this bomb collar to control you, but you don't have to fiddle with it anymore. The lock uses a 13-digit electronic lock, and with the program I designed, no one in this world can open it. Also, if it leaves your neck, it will explode. Dr. Terence helplessly touched the collar and said, I've already agreed to cooperate with you. As long as you don't let Imidin out and don't harm our tribe, I'll do my best to help you explore the city of the dead. Usually, it's other people who go to my country to explore and do archaeology, but I want to go to the great ruins of other countries to plunder. No, to be precise, I've been doing archaeology for a long time. Chen Ong nodded and smiled. So I can understand your feelings, and I don't believe you'll obediently obey us. The Qing Kingdom? Dr. Terence was surprised. I'd rather you call it China, the Central Kingdom, not the Kingdom of Porcelain. Of course, the fact that you know the word Qing means that you know more about our country than most Western scholars, Chen Ong explained. The mysterious and great Caries, the country praised by Voltaire. Dr. Terence complimented. My student, Evelyn, is also preparing to search for Hamunaptra, the city of the dead. I believe that you will not disturb the vengeful spirits that have been cursed there for thousands of years. Even though his soul has already returned to the underworld, the vengeful energy from Imhotep's bite will only strengthen his soul and magic power. Anubis favors him. He's even scarier than when he was alive. Once he's released, he'll destroy all life in this land, Terence advised. And the city of the dead is the mausoleum of the pharaohs. The pharaohs have ordered the priests to set many powerful curses there. It's also a taboo among us. All greedy people try to find it, but they usually don't even have their bones left. Listen to me, there's unspeakable horror there. I advise you to cancel your trip. Chen Ong said slowly, you've neglected the calendar and time. In the ancient Egyptian calendar, this year is the year of the cat, and the Sirius is rising with the sun. It's close to the birthday of Osiris, the god of the underworld. On that day, the moon, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars dominate the planetary time. The curse of the city of the dead will be at its weakest, and even mortals can enter and leave at will. Terrence's facial muscles twitched, and he couldn't help but ask, how do you know all this? I'm sure I've never revealed this. It's a secret among us guardians. Chen Ong nodded. It seems that I'm right. Have you heard of the Tomb Raider? Every layer of entanglement is a barrier. When I was studying for my doctorate in biology, I also studied for a doctorate in Chinese tomb culture. Professor Hu taught me how to divide gold and seal acupoints, was a half-family copy of the 16 characters of Yin-Yang Feng Shui secret technique. Not only can he defeat Chinese tombs, but he has also done a lot of research on foreign tombs. Terrence took a deep breath and said helplessly, I can take you to the city of the dead, but please don't disturb the souls of the pharaohs. When he said this, he seemed to have lost most of his energy and slumped weakly on the chair. Chen Ong respected this old man who was devoted to his mission. He nodded to him and gave the space to Dr. Terrence to adjust his mental state. He retreated from the room and saw Hong Fan coming up to him. He asked curiously in a low voice, Do you really know about tomb raiding? Chen Ong answered cleanly, I don't understand. Then how do you know when the curse of the city of the dead will weaken? Hong Fan asked nervously. The Lord is too cunning. If we foolishly followed the original plot and went to the city of the dead ahead of time, we would have run into him. No wonder the Americans in the original plot dug out the Book of the Dead and Imogen's coffin so easily. Turns out that they also paid attention to the timing. Chen Ong handed him a few large books. Hong Fan looked at the Egyptian and English characters in the books, confused. He listened to Chen Ang's explanation. What tomb raiding? That's all a lie. The real source of information is these books. In Dr. Terrence's library, there is a lot of information about ancient Egypt. It's not true that I know star feng shui, but it's true that I know Egyptian characters and hieroglyphs. So the reason you asked him to teach you Egyptian was actually to numb him? Hong Fan asked with his mouth wide open in surprise. Chen Ong had to answer, on the one hand and on the other hand, to learn the essence of his knowledge, so that I can better understand the relevant culture. After all, Dr. Terrence's decades of experience in this field are not fake. Hearing Chen Ang's words, the two could not help but click their tongues. Such a learning ability was formidable. With this information, we have a lot more places to use, Zhang Ziqiang said with a sneer. A hint of gloom flashed in Zhang Ziqiang's eyes. He sneered and said, Now we control the time of departure. I've spent a lot of gold this time to bribe and control those Americans. At the same time, I've mixed the prisoners and prison guards under our control into this team. Now we have absolute control over the two teams going to the city of the dead. Chapter 598. Hong Fan pondered for a while and asked a seemingly nonsensical question. So you lied to him when you said you were a Ph.D. in China's tomb culture? I knew it. You're a biology major. What kind of tomb culture do you know? I didn't lie to him, Chen Ong replied. Hong Fan and Zhang Ziqiang looked at him and said in surprise, You said you didn't lie to him? Yes. I am indeed a Ph.D. in China's tomb culture. At the same time, I am also a Ph.D. in Chinese literature, theoretical mathematics, organic chemistry, mechanical manufacturing, automation, botany, ecology, genetics, biochemistry, applied physics, and other related subjects. I have 16 Ph.D. degrees in China and 5 Ph.D. degrees in the United States. I am a Ph.D. in engineering and philosophy. Otherwise, how could I become the main researcher of a national project and lead several research groups at such a young age? Hong Fan and Zhang Ziqiang stared at him for a long time and finally left in silence. Chen Ong adjusted his glasses and saw a white light reflected from their lenses. Li Mingyi, who was next to him, saw it and couldn't help but sigh. This is the psychological shadow of a bad student facing a good student. Zhao Yingqi reminded him in a low voice, "Stop talking. Hurry up and organize the report in your hand." Generally speaking, the biggest role of newcomers in story missions was to drag the veterans down. But now, with Chen Ong, they were completely mobilized. In Chen Eng's view, these newcomers who had received higher education in the 21st century were not a drag, but a very valuable asset. Therefore, those white-collar students who were ready to carry guns and charge into battle were thrown back by Chen Ong to do their own jobs. Now, Li Mingyi, who had good grades in school and had received preliminary research training, became Chen Eng's experimental assistant, while Zhao Yingqi was responsible for managing the prison and strengthening control. Xiao Bolong was ordered to set up an intelligence department. Now, he was collecting and sorting out relevant information from all corners of Cairo. Lin Gang and Qian Tsuanho also took on important positions in the organization. The newcomers began to sort out the documents and formulate the relevant rules and regulations. They had been in God's space for a day, and they were so busy with the documents that they hadn't fired a single shot even though they were equipped with pistols. In Cairo, an invisible Weilo king gradually fell with the passage of time. No one noticed that there were more prisoners released from prison in the city. They were extremely adapted to the city. From every street, every dark corner, they sent the corresponding news to Chen Ong. Children shuttled through the crowd in the slums, waiters in high-end clubs, and bus drivers. They became Chen Eng's eyes and ears. In just a few days, Chen Eng's eyes and ears were everywhere in the city. Hong Fan was sent away to install remote monitors in key places. Zhang Ziqiang continued to strengthen his control over the city. He kidnapped high officials and nobles one after another, infiltrating the Suez Canal Company and colonial government. Chen Ong found a group of indigenous chemists from nowhere. Under Li Mingyi's guidance, they learned how to make Kong Kong. Evelyn and her brother Jonathan's whereabouts were closely monitored. When they visited the warden, they were routinely given a hard time. Without Chen Eng's permission, they wouldn't be able to see O'Connor. Fortunately, they seemed to be used to this kind of delay and didn't suspect anything was wrong. Chen Ong himself was now in the museum where Evelyn worked. With the help of Dr. Terence, he was modifying a stone statue. Terence shook his head. "Chen, I know you're very capable. You can understand Egyptian spells and spells in just a few hours, but you still don't know enough about them. We can't control all the stone statues. You can't equip them with machine guns." Dr. Terence pointed at the 23 to 2K machine guns in the statue's hands and the ammo box half embedded in the statue's back. He gesticulated and explained, "There are conditions for the selection of a stone statue. Its appearance, specifications, and even materials have strict requirements. Moreover, it has to go through devout worship and sacrificial rituals before it can be used as a carrier of magic. Don't even think about letting them learn how to shoot and aim. They're warriors of Anubis, not soldiers or warlords." Chen Eng's answer was completely irrelevant. "Studying and programming the human brain is my specialty, Dr. Terence. Don't worry, I can take care of a mere artificial intelligence in a minute. I've already kidnapped the most elite armed team of Cairo's warlords. When it's time for the divine ritual, I can change the spell and use their souls to replace Anubis and give these stone statues virtual intelligence. By then, they'll be better at shooting than anyone else." Dr. Terence was about to break down. He yelled, "Oh my God! You changed the spell and the magic text. It's useless. I'm proficient in 16 ancient languages, and I know 28 ancient languages. I'm also a grand arcanist who's proficient in summoning, transformation, evoking, and necromancy. As a golden immortal who's been recognized by the heavens, I'm at least multiverse level in occultism. If I don't know, who does? Chun-Ong replied domineeringly. Don't put armor on the jackal-headed stone statue. Oh my god! It's made of divine stone. You can't just modify it. Dr. Terrence begged. Please let go of my collection. They're going to be useless after you modify them so carelessly. My mummies. They're made of linen soaked in sinners' ashes and precious spices. They were the best warriors when they were alive. Even if you gave them grenades, they wouldn't know how to use them. You can't use acid to replace quicksand. The scarabs can't be half mechanized. Oh my god! Are you putting laser emitters on them? Strong acid won't work either. Not strong acid? Then what is this? Liquid bomb. Don't modify the scepter and the altar. Are you writing the runes? Junie runes? What's that? My oracle bone script. When dusk arrived, Zhang Ziqiang, who had hurriedly rushed back from Suez Canal Company, saw a scene he absolutely could not have imagined in the squad's headquarters prison. A steel jackal-head statue clad in full armor stood on both sides, 2 machine cannons in its hands, an enormous shield on its back. Meanwhile, Chun-Ong stood in front of it and explained, "This is my newest work, Defender. Its two-handed machine gun is a 23-2K machine gun designed by our country. I've modified and adjusted its structure. It's very suitable for urban warfare and frontal combat. It can fire 16 rounds per second, which is enough to suppress an enemy team. It has 2 internal ammunition, which can only provide it with full power for 10 minutes. Also, Captain and the others didn't prepare enough ammunition. It can only be changed 3 times, and it can only provide fire support for half an hour. When it's used up, it can only be replaced by the British machine guns. So, it should be used at the most critical moment as a trump card." Zhang Ziqiang looked at the jackal-headed statue that even its mother couldn't recognize and said, "It's already like this. Does Anubis still recognize it? Are you sure it can move?" Chun-Ong nodded and said, "I changed the ritual and runes to deceive Anubis, making him think that this is still his warrior. Look, isn't it still a jackal-headed statue? All I did was modify its material and provide it with the latest weapons." Bullsh*T. Everyone snorted. Other than the statue, it has nothing to do with Anubis at all. It's been changed to this state. Anubis's divine power is the source of the spell, activating the material of the Defender. I used the souls of elite soldiers to replace the virtual intelligence and reprogrammed it, giving it the corresponding judgment and combat ability. I also improved its structure. Because of the steel inside the shell, it's heavier than before. While it counteracts the recoil of the 2 machine guns, it also slows down its agility. However, even in close combat, the Defender has infinite strength and power output that surpasses that of excavators. It's not afraid of samsara travelers below 6 stars. Also, Chun-Ong controlled the Defender to open the nozzles on its shoulders and explained, "I also have a built-in flamethrower. Because special additives have been added to the oil, the temperature and adhesion have been greatly improved. Don't be fooled by its inconspicuous appearance, but the formula of the accelerant is on the same level as the aviation rocket. And this bomb-throwing mummy can carry up to 25 grenades. If we use the good stuff that our logistics department carries, its lethality will be high. Even if we use the current outdated equipment, it will still have a good support ability. There's also the strong acid mummy, the poisonous mummy, the plague mummy, and many other varieties. Unfortunately, due to the lack of raw materials, I can only make 2 of each. Currently, Professor Terrence is fully cooperating with us to collect the materials. In a week at most, I can upgrade the product to the 3rd generation and expand the number to a standard 18-man team. This is the strong acid scarab, and this is the flaming scarab. They are all the scarab puppets that have been modified with strengthening acids and flame retardant. There's also a living plague scarab. Because I've cultivated a few viruses, it's not convenient to use it temporarily. However, you can trust its lethality. It's definitely not a problem to kill most people in Cairo. It's a weapon of mass destruction that I've specially modified. Other than that, there are some other products, but they can't form a large-scale combat force. They can only be used as reserve technical equipment. I've made some experimentally. At the same time, I'm also researching other weapons. Although there's currently no industrial support, and it's difficult to produce poison gas on a large scale, I've already gained inspiration from the curses in witchcraft and divine art. I'm currently modifying the poison gas using both magic and science. At the same time, I'm also making several mutated biological weapons. Chen Ong closed the experimental records in his hands and finally concluded, the military power and weapons in our hands are developing rapidly. When I've finished researching the cursed virus and cursed mutated scarab, we'll have the power to directly fall out with England. We can already carry out large-scale attacks and fatal strikes on Cairo and the surrounding areas. We're trying to prepare to carry out an extermination attack on England, but it's too difficult. We don't have enough time and materials. Please continue to work hard. Chen Ong finally said, as for our main enemy, the Samsara travelers who are expected to arrive, we've already made material and weapons preparations to fight them for a few months. We've already prepared intelligence, surveillance, and control. We've also prepared a surprise attack team. We can remotely control the defenders and the mummies at any time to carry out attacks. Wait! Hong Fan suddenly reacted. Remotely control attacks? Then we don't have to do anything? Chen Ong explained, our task is very heavy. Everyone has to be prepared to work through the night and bear a lot of work. At the same time, you have to be responsible for the plan's adjustments and maneuvers at any time, including on-site leadership and monitoring. Assist the mummies and the defenders to carry out attack. He made way for an ancient altar behind him and said solemnly, this is the core of the remote command system. I'll be here to command the defenders and the mummies to fight. The location of the temporary command center will be an absolute secret. Only the 2 veterans and I can enter and exit at will. At that time, the prison will be the supply point and the second command center. Now we can arrange for Evelyn and O'Connor to meet, he said to Zhao. Zhao came back to her senses and nodded. Yes. Then she asked with some hesitation, don't you want to go and have a look? Chapter 599. At dusk, a team of 7 people suddenly appeared in a hotel room in Cairo City. Although they wore white robes commonly seen in desert areas, their appearance and behavior were still incompatible with this era. It was the expected arrival of the prayer reincarnation team. One of the deep voices said to the others in English, the main mission is to stop Imogen from resurrecting within a month. The side mission is to hunt down 3 reincarnators, kill Eddie, the leader of the Pharaoh's vestigial guardians, and kill Hafs, the priest who is trying to resurrect Imogen. During the mission, killing hostile reincarnators will give you 40% of their current reward points and 4 items of any kind in their personal space. It seems that Lord God wants us to keep that reincarnation team. The man laughed. Another woman analyzed. That reincarnation team entered before us. In Lord God's assessment, our strength should be better than theirs. However, the main mission issued by Lord God is relatively lenient, allowing us to hide in the dark and gain the corresponding advantage. It seems that they have a relatively good relationship with the plot characters and won the advantage of influence. That's why Lord God balanced our strength like this. The deep voice continued, then we will ambush them on their way to the city of the dead. First, we will find out the whereabouts of O'Connor and the others. Evelyn is a relatively large target and can be easily recognized. Moreover, there is someone who definitely knows their whereabouts, which will make it easier for us to lock on to them. You mean the warden in the original plot? Another thinner figure said in surprise. Yes. The woman continued, the warden is the sponsor of Evelyn's operation and wants 25% of the treasure. He will definitely know Evelyn's whereabouts. Otherwise, what if she runs away with the money? The enemy is in the dark, and we are in the light. Moreover, our strength is far better than theirs. This time, we will definitely win. The thin figure said proudly. Johnson, don't be too proud. The deep male voice said hesitantly, I feel something is wrong. If we really have a great advantage as we think, then Lord God's main mission will not be so lenient. Or perhaps they would send a weaker team to take over. Since they arranged for us to enter, then that team must have a trump card that can compete with us. Be careful. Everyone responded and prepared to leave the hotel for the library and prison where Evelyn worked. Their appearance in the lobby of the hotel was a little conspicuous. Several locals and even the waiters were staring at them. When they saw the man in the lead purposely reveal the weapon at his waist, they retracted their gazes and behaved themselves. These people did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. They had always done this when carrying out a mission. There were people coming and going here every day. Who knew who they were? But when they heard that they had left, a few of the guests who were drinking in the hotel lobby left in a hurry. After a while, even the only waiter quietly ran to the back door and said something to someone. This happened several times as they walked, and it became less frequent, especially after they had paid handsomely for the addresses of the city's prisons and libraries. Tens of minutes later, the information regarding these people was delivered to Chun Ang's desk. Zhao Yingqi stood in front of him and nervously reported. Today, there were several reports regarding them. They wore gorgeous clothes and were dressed mysteriously. They even had weapons and asked our people for the address of this museum. I have already arranged for people to pay attention to them. Chenong nodded and said, Well done. When you sent the first report, I had already sent scouting scarabs to monitor them. They should be the people we are looking for. Captain Zhang and Hong Fan are on the way. After Zhao Yingqi left, Chen Ong put down his book and stood in front of the window. He looked at the walls of the museum and muttered to himself, The prey has fallen into the trap. They were clearly in a disadvantageous position, yet they could not analyze it. When there is a black hole in the information, they actually dared to split up. You guys are courting death. It seems that dealing with you guys is easier than I thought. More than 20 carefully selected gangsters, prison guards, and gendarmes quietly set off from the stronghold. Some unidentified people gradually appeared at the places where the reincarnators were hiding and slowly surrounded the entire area. A few large trucks drove out from an inconspicuous courtyard behind the museum. The trucks seemed to be carrying something heavy. Just as everything was progressing in an orderly manner, a tall young man who was silently wiping his sword among the reincarnators hiding near the museum suddenly raised his head and said, Something's wrong. There are people moving around stealthily nearby. Jen, use your spiritual search to check. The woman pressed her index finger on her temple. After a while, she raised her head and said, There are people surrounding this place. They are ordinary people and seem to be gangsters. We might have been discovered. I don't know if the local powers discovered them themselves or if they are working with the reincarnators and aborigines. The tall young man's face was also not looking good. I'll go catch a tongue and ask, someone said as he stood up and walked towards the door. At this moment Jen suddenly shouted, Jude, get down! The reincarnator called Jude didn't understand what was going on before he was shot down by a fierce barrage. The huge crossfire tore apart his upper body with dozens of bullets per second. Jen, where are they? The tall young man pulled out his sword and roared at the woman. There are people at the entrance and the back door. They are hiding in simple bunkers and arranged according to the firing point. The machine gun that killed Jude came from a black thing. Damn it, it's a cannon. It's a reincarnator. Chen Ong stood in the middle of the altar and used his spirit to descend on the summoned creatures and puppets through the runes and sacrifices on the altar. He chanted a mysterious spell in ancient Egyptian, and the mummy he possessed suddenly turned into sand. A sinister curse was attached to the spiritual force that was probing out from the courtyard. Jen, who was investigating, suddenly screamed as black blood flowed out of her eyes. A few sandstorm tornadoes suddenly appeared where she stood. The mummies wrapped in the sandstorm attacked her. Jen crushed a crystal bottle in her hand and sprinkled the holy water in the surroundings. The nearest mummy was splashed in the face and its head melted. Chen-Ong, who was commanding from the museum, smiled and gently pulled the ring on the mummy's body. Jen was shocked to see that the rings of several grenades had been pulled open in the mummy's hollow chest. She screamed and activated a special equipment. A thin layer of shield appeared around her. Just as Jen's face flashed with the joy of surviving a disaster, the grenades wrapped in the mummy's remains suddenly exploded. The storm formed by the evil spell greatly weakened the power of the shield. Then, the grenades that Chen-Ong had modified easily tore the shield and Jen apart. Chen-Eng's consciousness left the mummies and finally ordered them to attack the tall youth. He had already killed a few local gangsters who dared to ambush outside the door. Seeing that Jen had died so unexpectedly, the tall youth and another skinny reincarnator rushed out of the courtyard through the window and ran outside. The defenders, who were already prepared, attacked them like a storm. These reincarnators had no choice but to use their precious defensive tools. The skinny man turned into a wisp of black smoke and drifted away. Chen-Ong casually used a mental shock to hit him. Under the hail of bullets from the defenders, the skinny man did not even last a breath before he was torn to pieces by the cannon. The powerful cannon tore his body into pieces, leaving no bones behind. In the end, the tall young man was surrounded by several mummies. He used his supernatural bullets to force them to retreat and used an evil warding talisman to protect himself. Then, he rushed toward the defender. He pushed his movement technique to the extreme, taking advantage of the defender's lack of agility and the momentary delay in aiming, and successfully ran to the defender's side. He casually stuck a magnetic explosive on its body. A magnetic bomb? Chen-Ong recognized that it was a magnetic bomb developed by the U.S. government to fight against the Transformers in the world of Transformers. Although the defenders were equipped with thick armor, it was still not comparable to the Transformers. This magnetic bomb was enough to kill the defender that Chen-Ong had painstakingly modified. Thankfully, Chen-Ong was very familiar with the principle and structure of this kind of bomb. He casually used a mummy and the flesh and blood of the gangsters that had been killed around him. Their full skin shriveled, and their flesh and blood turned into corrosive black fog that seeped into the magnetic bomb and corroded the electronic components inside. More black fog turned into a curse and drilled into the tall man's body. The man who was focused on fighting suddenly blacked out and lost his vision. A flowing flame suddenly shot out from the chest of the defender in front of him, igniting him. The tall man who was screaming in pain had his curse triggered by Chen-Ong. The flames outside his body and the flames formed by the curse in his body fueled each other. In a few breaths, the tall man was burned to ashes. The captain of the prayer team who was waiting for the warden suddenly heard a series of notifications. One member of the prayer team has been killed. One member of the prayer team has been killed. Your teammate number 81278 has been killed. The notifications were repeated so many times that he almost thought the main god's notification would be repeated 3 times. The infuriated captain roared, "Who did this?" At that moment, the door of the warden's office burst open. 2 machine guns fired into the room. The captain roared and rolled on the ground. He pounced forward and punched the defender's calf heavily. The disadvantage of the humanoid puppet structure was immediately revealed. Chen-Ong had purposely used steel as a support point, but he failed to fulfill his duty and was interrupted by the captain's punch. The entire defender lost its stability and fell to the ground. Chapter 600. The defender's chest that had fallen to the ground spewed out oil that had been added with a combustion-enhancing oxidizer. The blazing flames rushed towards the captain, but the leather armor on his body emitted a dazzling white light, isolating him from the flames. Taking advantage of this moment, the captain quickly retreated. The oil that had stained his trousers was decisively cut off by him. He rolled towards a hidden place and transformed into a small, red-eyed bat the moment he landed on the ground. He flew towards the air vent. At this moment, the reincarnator who had rushed outside the wall suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. His entire body had been pounced on by a dozen sacred beetles. The poisonous sacred beetles sprayed venom on his body, mixing with his skin and flames, making him look extremely miserable. Even more sacred beetles continuously crawled onto his body. The reincarnator's resistance became weaker and weaker, and he was finally submerged in the swarm of sacred beetles. The last reincarnator took out 2 pistols and was the first to hide under cover. However, when he raised his head, he saw a mummy that had turned into sand waiting for him above his head. With a loud shout, he fired repeatedly with both pistols. The supernatural bullets that had been smeared with holy water turned the mummy into a sieve. However, the mummy only spat out a mouthful of poisonous sand. The reincarnator who was fortunate enough to experience Chen Ang's magical and scientific cursed poisonous sand, which he had created using the Shushan world's unorthodox sand magical treasure. His entire face was hit by the poisonous sand. The intense pain caused him to cover his eyes and scream. He had only taken a few steps before he fell to the ground, half of his head melting away. The captain, who had transformed into a bat and escaped through the air vent, could not help but rejoice at his choice when he saw the situation outside the warden's office. Hundreds of prisoners and prison guards surrounded the office with guns. The entire prison immediately turned into the tightest line of defense. There were densely packed sacred beetles, a few unruly-looking mummies, and even a reincarnator who was calmly holding the line. Damn it! Isn't that Zhang Ziqiang? The team leader immediately felt that something was wrong. He knew that Zhang Ziqiang's team had almost been completely wiped out in the previous team battle. Even so, Zhang Ziqiang's combat power was still above his. It was just that he did not have the cooperation of his teammates, which was why his overall evaluation was lower than his. Although he did not know what kind of medicine Zhang Ziqiang had taken to design such a meticulous and murderous plan, the team leader could smell the aura of righteousness behind it. This kind of overt plot was built on overwhelming strength. However, due to the ambush, the prayers team was only able to display 10% of their full strength. However, the captain still had to admit that Zhang Ziqiang's team's overall strength was above that of the prayers. Now, he was alone, and not only was Zhang Ziqiang's individual strength far superior to his, even his overall strength was terrifyingly strong. The team leader couldn't help but think, could it be that I have to use items to offset the penalty for failing the main mission? At this moment, a strange wind suddenly appeared in front of him, and countless yellow sand condensed to form the appearance of an unfamiliar man. Chen Ong had used the most special mummy he had modified to transform from the museum to the prison thousands of meters away. He smiled and said, "So it's the Blood Clan? What a precious experimental subject. We mustn't let them destroy it." The team leader did not say a word. He reverted to his human form in midair, but a huge pair of bat wings grew out from his back. He nimbly circled around in the air like a huge grayish-black bat, and his movements were extremely mysterious. He opened up his claws, and there was a hint of blood-red flames on his fingernails. His 2 claws actually had a pattern to them. This Baron-level Blood Clan member used a mysterious and unfathomable claw technique and ruthlessly stabbed toward Chen Ang's lower ribs. 9 divine claws. Chen Ong was a little surprised. This Caucasian man's imagination was really wild. A Blood Clan member practiced 9 divine claws instead of black magic. Looking at his withered black fingernails that emitted a faint stench, it was obvious that he had also practiced some invisible poisonous claws to increase his lethality. The 9 divine claws was also Mei Chaofeng's strange and sinister path. However, it was a pity that when it came to martial arts knowledge, how could a foreigner like him, who only knew a little and relied on the strengthening of the main god, compare to a native martial arts grandmaster like Chen Ong? Chen Ong turned around and returned to his yellow sand state, leaving only a blurry face. The yellow sand was crystal clear and had a hint of steel luster. It was obvious that he had used magic to refine it in advance. Chen Ong used the yellow sand to push and wear down the Blood Clan member's chest. Just like the iron sand when the iron sand palm was inserted, his chest that was hit by the 9 divine claws suddenly caved in. The sharp yellow sand that carried the curse was like iron sand. It removed most of the Blood Clan member's strength and even took away a bit of his flesh. Ignoring the blood flame on the Blood Clan member's claws, the yellow sand intertwined along his arm. A huge, sluggish force locked the arm of the leader of the prayers. He struggled in fear, but it was useless. Gradually, he was submerged in the yellow sand. The few mummies on the ground had already turned into yellow sand and pounced on him. A huge mass of sand appeared in mid-air and firmly sealed the leader of the prayers within it. As Chen Ong chanted on the altar, the leader of the prayers gradually turned into a struggling clay statue. The clay statue landed beside Zhang Ziqiang. Suddenly, Chen Ang's voice came from mid-air. "This is my experimental subject. You must take good care of it for me. He is sealed by the curse formed by the power of the 6 mummies. Try not to let him see the cat, the sun, and the statue, lest Anubis finds out that I am stealing his power." Zhang Ziqiang smiled bitterly and took over the responsibility of taking care of the clay statue. In fact, no one knew the shock in his heart. The strength of the prayers was not to be underestimated. Although Zhang Ziqiang's team was stronger than them before the group battle, their overall strength was only slightly better. Now that he had lost a lot of his strength, the prayers, who were not much weaker than he was at his peak, were actually powerless in front of him. To be precise, they were powerless in front of Chen Ong. Did this not mean that even if he was at his peak, with his companions and teammates around, it would still be difficult for him to fight against him? Zhang Ziqiang had never thought that Chen Ong could modify such a terrible weapon with just a little bit of contact with the power system of this world. With his knowledge, it was naturally difficult for him to understand the knowledge involved in the modification of the mysticism by Chen Ong. He thought that Chen Ong had only added a layer of steel protection to the puppets and mummies, installed modern weapons, added gunpowder, bombs, strong acids, and poisons. He did not understand the gold content of the theology, supreme magical skills, and alchemy engineering involved. He did not know how difficult it was to deceive a powerful god, and how terrifying it was. It could be said that even the high priest Imidon at his peak could not deceive Anubis. In the hands of Anubis, he was just a plaything, but Chen Ong could toy with Anubis. Of course, in the current era, the power of the gods had greatly declined, and their ability to affect reality was getting weaker and weaker. However, it was an indisputable fact that Chen Ong was using and toying with Anubis, changing the casting material, using steel that was less friendly to magic to make puppets, super long-range casting, super long-range control, the use of the power of faith telekinesis, the use of no materials, the school of transformation, virtual intelligence, and the school of curses were enough to make an archmage go crazy. Chapter 601. 10 minutes later, Zhang Ziqiang dragged the clay statue of the leader of the prayer team to the museum where Chen Ong was located. He waited obediently in the curator's office of the museum, not daring to step into the basement where Chen Ong was located. He had already recognized that this newcomer was a monster, so he wisely adjusted their positions. It's embarrassing to listen to the leader of a newcomer, but it's better than losing your life like you. Zhang Ziqiang patted the face of the leader of the prayer team. Of course, the solidified clay statue would not answer. Zhang Ziqiang sighed as he looked at the horrified expression on the man's frozen face. He remembered that the other newcomers were still working overnight. Xiao Bolong was distributing pensions to the prisoners and gang members who had died tonight. Zhao Yingqi was sorting out information and documents. Li Mingyi was cleaning up the battlefield, arranging the loot and corpses left behind by the reincarnators and transporting them to Chen Ang's laboratory. He also had to maintain and sort out the scrapped modified souls. Hong Fan was still killing people. Even the appearance of the reincarnators did not hinder him from cleaning up. There were too many enemies and problems for a rising force to control Cairo. Hong Fan had no choice but to hold his dagger and reason with the original owners of the city one by one. Those with soft bones would be taken in for his own use, while those who were dismissive or even hostile would need to be slowly dealt with by him. At the same time, they would provide raw materials for Chen Ang's experiment. He was so busy that his feet did not even have time to rest. In the past 2 days, he had rushed to kill dozens of people. From the dock area of Cairo, where people from all walks of life mingled, to the banquet hall where high officials and nobles mingled. In just 2 days, the women and children in Cairo had learned of Hong Fan, the bloody Skinslinger, the Dark Executioner, and the Emperor of Cairo's underworld. Under his pair of daggers, ghosts lingered and bloodstained. Hong Fan's notoriety had reached a level that could stop children from crying in a short period of time. Whether it was the various problems encountered during the expansion or the complicated work required in the process of controlling Cairo, these tasks were trivial and troublesome. Although they did not pose a difficult threat, they still required everyone's full energy. In this process, Zhang Ziqiang had never expected that several newcomers would play a very key role. Xiao Bolong was a customer manager of a large multinational company. He was middle-aged and had rich management experience. Before becoming a customer manager, he had worked in many large management positions. He had no lack of experience in the gray and black of China's business world. He had no lack of experience in dealing with all kinds of bad people. However, after entering middle age, his energy had run out, so he had to rely on his own connections. Now, he had successfully transformed into a professional manager and the head of an intelligence organization in Cairo's underground underworld in the 20th century. He was so busy that he had a fever every 24 hours. These days, he had only slept for 2 hours a day, relying on the stimulants modified by Chen Ang. He dedicated himself to. It should be known that the original sample of Chen Ang's modified stimulants was a good product that Zhang Ziqiang had exchanged from the Lord God. It was generally used when a samsara traveler was on the brink of death, and it was used in the final struggle against the enemy. When Zhang Ziqiang saw Xiao Bolong's blood-red eyes burning like a torch every day, even the lazy locals in Cairo would double their work efficiency. Zhang Ziqiang felt even more creeped out. When he met Xiao Bolong, he would quietly bypass him. Even a samsara traveler like Zhang Ziqiang, who held an old-fashioned concept, had to admit that a newcomer like Xiao Bolong, who was originally a low-quality trash in the samsara team system, had a very important value to the entire team. His hard work, like Hong Fan's fighting and violence, was an outstanding contribution to the entire team. Zhang Ziqiang had to reflect on himself. Were only those who were ruthless and brave enough to have the so-called potential and value? Were those middle-aged people who could burn for their work and risk their lives? Those middle-aged people who had rich experience and were good at dealing with interpersonal relationships and management work garbage, who could not adapt to the Lord God space? The answer was obvious. Zhao Yingqi, who was responsible for document management and organizational system construction, and Li Mingyi, who was responsible for supporting research and managing the logistics of Chen Ang's research, also did a good job. They all had outstanding contributions. On the contrary, Zhang Ziqiang had originally thought highly of Qian Xuanhou, who was ruthless and courageous, and Lin Gang, who was tenacious and hard-working, did not perform well. Zhang Ziqiang truly felt the difference between Chen Ang's samsara team and his own. Chen Ang was more used to using hard work to create a comparative advantage, dragging the opponent into his rhythm. Then, like a rolling snowball, he would accumulate more and more advantages, and in the end, he would easily finish off the opponent. Others only saw the casual way in which he launched his final attack, but very few people noticed the complicated and arduous work behind the scenes. It was hard to say that this style was better than the violent, sneaky, and infiltration combat of other samsara teams. After all, other teams did not have the accumulation of knowledge and work efficiency like Chen Ong. But in Chen Eng's hands, it had amazing potential. The sound of a mechanism opening came from the basement. Zhang Ziqiang turned around with a flattering smile and saw Chen Ong, who was wearing a white coat, rushing out of the basement. He ordered, "Carry him to my lab. Li Mingyi has already sorted out the relevant spoils and will be here soon. The three of us will confirm the distribution and management of the spoils first, and then inform the others." Because the spoils were not prioritized during the battle, they did not take into account the props carried by the hostile samsara travelers, so they used very destructive means. In the end, the spoils were not rich. From the samsara team that went to the museum, they finally obtained a large number of firearms, a small amount of electronic equipment, and great wealth of gold, diamonds, and so on. However, the props unique to the samsara travelers were only a few bottles of holy water, some blessed bullets for spiritual creatures, a war blade, a magnetic high-explosive bomb, a few broken amulets, evil-warding amulets, the body of a psychic power user, and a piece of equipment that could vaporize people. Most of the personal items of the samsara travelers were damaged in the battle. In addition to some reward points obtained from them, the rest of the items in the personal space could only be obtained after returning to God's space. Zhang Ziqiang first picked up the war blade that was half the height of a person. Because of the intense burning, it looked a little dark. God gave its attribute. Damaged blade of curse, grade B equipment, damaged. Chop power increased by 20%. It comes with a bleeding curse that can be stacked 12 times. It comes with a poison curse that can be stacked 9 times. It comes with a slow curse that can be stacked 3 times. Because the equipment was burned, the effect is reduced by 40%. It can be repaired after returning to the space. Zhang Ziqiang cursed, "Damn it! If this attribute was used on a dagger, it would be the best assassin equipment." Old Hong's eyes were red when he saw it. But it's a waste to use it on such a heavy war blade. This attribute should be used on a weapon with a fast attack speed. How many wounds can such a war blade make? It's better to kill it with 1 slash. Chen Ong took the war blade and studied the inscription on the handle and blade for a while. He handed it back to Zhang Ziqiang and said, "This is a sacrificial knife used by the Mayans to offer sacrifices to the gods. It is used to chop off the head of a blood sacrifice. The long-term drinking of resentful blood and the baptism of the sacrifice's divine power allowed the Mayan divine text on it to have extraordinary power." "But," Chen Ong said scornfully, "it's flashy but not practical. It's very difficult to inscribe inscriptions on weapons that are really used in battle. This is because you have to consider whether the inscription will be damaged during battle. Therefore, it won't be like this war blade, which has such a long inscription. It's very easy to be damaged during chop and chop. The fragmentation and blurring of the inscription will greatly reduce the effect of the enchantment. But in a real battle, how can the enemy be as defenseless as a sacrifice? So, don't open it. Its effect is strong, and the inscription is still well preserved. The samsara traveler who used it must have spent a lot of reward points to repair it after every mission. And it can't be a dagger, because a dagger can't carve such a long inscription. In general, this is not a piece of equipment suitable for battle." Zhang Ziqiang looked at Chen Ong blankly and suddenly sighed. "Big brother, I'm kneeling. You're not a scientist, you're an alchemist." As he said that, he looked at the war blade no longer as reluctant as before. He threw the precious equipment back on the long table in front of him without hesitation. Chapter 602. Chen Ong continued, "This holy water is a positive energy material that has been processed by divine magic. It can directly dispel negative energy, and can also be used as a material for other magic rituals. I can use it for some research and to create blessed bullets that are targeted at the undead and evil creatures." Chen Ong picked up a blessed bullet and showed it to everyone. This was a silver-white bullet. On the bullet head, there were 2 mysterious runes engraved. Li Mingyi only felt that this was a very beautiful piece of art. Only when Zhang Ziqiang held it in his hand could he feel a kind of holy radiant power, which should be the positive energy that Chen Ong mentioned. Zhang Ziqiang grinned and said, "Oh, what a high-end item." He shook the blessed bullet in his hand and looked at the hundreds of similar bullets in front of him. He sighed. The praying team must have checked the information of the next mission in advance. Otherwise, they wouldn't have prepared so many blessed bullet. This type of blessed bullet costs 20 points in the realm, and there are nearly 100 of them here. Considering that this is only carried by one person, they must have spent at least 10,000 points. If the next mission is not a supernatural or magical world, they will suffer a great loss. Chen Ong picked up a blessed bullet and smiled. The inscription on this bullet is rune, and the material is mixed with silver. After a special magic ritual, it can carry positive energy. That special magic ritual should be the so-called blessing of the church. The church in this world is likely to have this power. Because I don't have direct information, I can't crack the secret of the church to make this blessed bullet. But Terence has the information of the church's divine magic. If we can use the pre-processed holy water as a magic material, it shouldn't be difficult to make it. So, if you need it, we will soon have a powerful weapon. Zhang Ziqiang asked curiously, "How much holy water do you need to make one of these bullets? If the cost-effectiveness is too low, then don't use it." Chen Ong replied, "I can use the ancient Egyptian blessing ritual to add some of the ancient Egyptian divine blessings to this bullet, making it more lethal to evil creatures. Against ancient Egyptian evil creatures like the mummies, it can at least cause twice the original damage. But holy water can't replace it. A bottle of holy water can make at least 100 bullets of blessed bullet. With what we have now, it should be enough." Unexpectedly, Zhang Ziqiang was not happy after hearing this. Instead, he was a little stunned. He muttered to himself, "The Lord really King cheated me of my money. A bottle of holy water only costs 500 points, and 100 bullets of blessed bullets cost me 2,000 points." Zhang Ziqiang snapped back to reality. Bye. We will make as many as you have. I still have 2 bottles of holy water. Together with the 4 bottles here, we have 600 bullets of blessing. I can even kill Imhotep. Make as many as you have." When he felt Li Mingyi's cautiousness, he suddenly came to his senses. Looking at Chen Ang's calm and somewhat indifferent expression, Zhang Ziqiang whispered in a flattering voice, "I mean, please help us make some. I can't use all of them on the bullets of blessing. You have to leave at least 2 bottles for me to experiment on," Chen Ong said calmly. Zhang Chen nodded and bowed. Chen said, "I have. Please use them first. We will use the rest." Chen Ong glanced at him and continued, "These amulets can protect against firearms. Now that they have been damaged, we can only use them for experiments and research. As for these evil-warding amulets, they are also finished product. I can't decipher the magic effects of the Taoist priest's talismans. Moreover, there is very little information about magic from the East in the information provided by Terence. It will be difficult to modify them. Let's give them to the newbies for self-defense. This amulet is very interesting. I need to study it for a while before I can give an answer. The remaining magnetic bomb is quite powerful. We can keep it as a reserve. Finally, it's the most valuable reward." Chen Ong smiled as he looked at the clay statue of the leader of the prayer party. "We have captured a complete reincarnator. Let's not talk about his equipment for now. His very existence is even more charming. Chen Ong said happily, "This is a member of the Blood Clan. It's an extremely valuable experimental subject in both magic and science. It's also one of my greatest gains in this world. Finally, I can return to my old profession. In the next few days, I will devote myself to his research. Terence and Li Mingyi will join as my assistants." He turned to Zhang Chen and said, "The current situation should be stabilized. We can temporarily stop the encroachment on Cairo to expand. Many of our problems may be solved from him. Installing explosives in his body is too low level. I have controlled countless mutants, and the simplest method is to inject blood-friendly liquid nanobombs. There will never be a day when I will use such crude product. With this experimental subject of the Blood Clan, I have some clues about the biological weapons and technological products I envisioned. Now I can use magic to temporarily overcome the current crude experimental conditions. I can think about the problems raised by him from the perspectives of mysticism and science." Chen Ong showed a rare expression of losing control. Zhang Cheng and Li Mingyi looked at him with a face full of fanaticism and excitement. Chen Ong almost could not wait to chase them out. He did not even do any experiments related to the holy water and devoted himself to the preparatory work. At dawn the next day, Li Mingyi and Dr. Terence, who had slept for a while, were summoned by Chen Ong to the underground laboratory of the museum. Chen Ong casually opened a small drawer next to him and took out 6 dangerous-looking blue syringes. He handed them to them and explained casually, "This is my newly modified refreshment drug. It can stimulate the operation of your brain, improve intelligence and mental acuity, resist fatigue, promote blood circulation, and experience recovery. 1 syringe is enough for you to work continuously for 3 days. Now, none of you here have 24 hours a day. Devote yourself to the research. At the same time, I have also modified a blood sacrifice magic. Every hour, 3 men next door will be sacrificed to Anubis to provide you with energy." Chen Ong finished talking and got ready to work. Li Mingyi was a little shocked. "This thing? There are no side effects?" He looked at the blue syringe and asked with some fear. Professor Terence, who was next to him, had already injected the drug into his veins. He smiled bitterly and said, "Of course there are side effects, but you have no choice, right? You see, I am already so old, but I still have to suffer with you. Just accept your fate." In the end, Li Mingyi could not help but throw this question to Chen Ong. Chen Ong answered casually while preparing the surgical equipment and magic materials, "Of course there are side effects, but you do not need to know, right?" he asked Li Mingyi calmly. Li Mingyi looked at the madness and indifference in the depths of Chen Ang's eyes. His whole body trembled and he replied shakily, "Yes, I will inject it now." Hong Fan sat across the desk of an Egyptian officer with a tired face. He supported his face and asked in a low voice, "Then, Sir Captain, do you want to cooperate with us? Or do you have other requests?" The bearded captain said with a greedy face, "Sir, I do not mean to offend you, but my men also need pocket money. As long as you can give me 20%, I will turn a blind eye to the actions of your men." Hong Fan sighed numbly and said, "But this is already the 2nd time we have talked. We have already satisfied your request last time." The bearded captain smiled and said, "These days, the pressure on me from above has been increasing. They want me to immediately report some of the small movements in the city. I am also bearing the risk. My request is completely reasonable." Hong Fan sighed and said, "You are asking for too much, sir." He stood up and walked to the door. The bearded captain looked at him calmly. When Hong Fan suddenly turned around halfway, he showed a confident smile, but what he waited for was a series of bullets. Hong Fan calmly hit all 6 bullets on his chest. Looking at the bearded man who died with his eyes open, he saved the last bit of his strength and said, "Your men are more content than you. He only wants 10% to die with you." Hong Fan did not talk to the bearded confidant who came up with a flattering smile. He dragged his tired body to the car and called Zhang Ziqiang. Big brother, this is my 9th target today. I haven't slept in 48 hours. Can you please let me rest for a while? In the future, you can KO this kind of small fry yourself? Zhang Ziqiang explained. Hong, you have to work hard. If I arrange people to get rid of him, I still have to make a mission plan. Xiao Bolong can't even speak. He just went into shock yesterday and needs to rest for a day. Zhao is here to help, but she looks like she is dying. She is a girl, can you be a gentleman? When the natives are developed, you can relax. Hong Fan looked at the corpses that were squeezed in his trunk inside. These were all experimental materials and supplies. Every day, in order to maintain the energy of the defenders and mummies, more than 50 hypnotized fanatics had to pray day and night. From time to time, there was also blood sacrifice and killing sacrifices to maintain the altar left by Chen Ong to deceive Anubis. So in order to save money, Hong Fan carefully packed the corpses he killed. By the way, he drove a truck. In between Zhang Ziqiang's tasks, Hong Fan rested his forehead on the steering wheel and began to recall how he fell from a cold-blooded assassin to this point. It was a truly inhumane memory. Dr. Chen, please come out of seclusion. I really can't take it anymore. Sovereigns, just let me die. In the underground laboratory of the museum, after nearly a week of hard work, Chen Ong finally completed all the experimental plans and announced that he was out of seclusion. Li Mingyi was lying on the experiment table, his face pale, only covered with a white cloth. The slight rise and fall of his chest proved that he was still alive. Dr. Terrence's face was pale, but he was hiding in the dark energetically. Chapter 603. Dr. Terrence glanced at Li Mingyi worriedly. He turned around and asked, Chen, is Li really okay? I feel like he's out of breath. Without turning back, Chen Ong said, it's the side effect of the stimulant. I've already prepared a concoction to treat the long-term overdraft of vitality, but he just doesn't want to become a vampire, so he can only recover slowly. I injected him with the blood serum. Although it doesn't change his nature and can only replenish his vitality, it's enough for him to recover. Terrence shook his head. Chen, you should know that Li is still young. He won't understand the fear of death that only old people like me have. That's why he's worried about changing his human identity. That's understandable. But the initial concoction and experiments only changed his body in the form of a virus, right? Chen Ong explained. We haven't reached the step of completely changing his human identity, right? The virus we concoct is just a biochemical concoction technology. It can increase one's strength, agility, and recovery. At the same time, it's just a fear of light and a desire for blood. There's still a long way to go before he becomes a real vampire. Terrence nodded in agreement. He sighed. For immortality, I have no choice but to walk this path. Chen, I'm willing to be your test subject, but don't forget what you promised me. When Terrence and Chen Ong were studying the captain of the prayer team, they made great progress from this blood-breed baron. Now, the virus that turned Terrence into a blood-breed state was extracted from the captain of the prayer team. Of course, the captain of the prayer team did not obtain the blood-breed bloodline from the world of Legend of the Night, but a bloodline strengthened by the Lord God. This virus, which was named Vampire No. 1, was the result of Chen Ong implanting bacteria to stimulate his immunity and infect the relevant gene fragments in his body with the virus. After a large number of experiments and modifications, he extracted the corresponding functional gene from it and cultivated a highly sensitive virus that was symbiotic with the human body. In other words, the captain of the prayer team was actually equivalent to a completely different kind of creature. Through the strengthening of the Lord God, he had turned himself into another life form, the Blood Clan. Moreover, the Lord God had strengthened the Blood Clan bloodline, eliminating the genetic weaknesses such as photophobia, holy water, and garlic. Chun Ong had cultivated the virus and extracted the corresponding genetic fragments in his body to create the vampire number 1 virus. Furthermore, he had successfully improved the symbiosis between the virus and the human body. Injecting the virus into the body would change one's genes. Blood and bodily fluids would contain a large amount of the vampire virus. Compared to the main god's enhancement, the vampire virus would be even weaker. He would still retain his human identity. However, it was equivalent to being infected with a biochemical virus and not completely turning him into a vampire. Zhang Ziqiang, Hong Fan, and the newbies were overjoyed when they heard the news. They were almost in tears of happiness. The work over the past few days had almost driven them crazy. However, Chun Ong only asked Zhang Ziqiang to give the newbies a portion of the recovery hormone extracted from the blood before sending most back to work. It was thanks to Hong Fan's persistent pestering that Chun Ong had the opportunity to report the results to everyone. Looking at the tired gazes below and the sunken eye sockets and dark circles under the reincarnator's eyes, Chun Ong could not help but smile. I know everyone is very tired. In order to solve the problem of everyone's hard work, I have thought of many ways. Finally, I have made the corresponding product. Everyone, please take a look at this. He took out a potion. Everyone, who had been barely able to lift their spirits, suddenly became depressed. Sigh. I was wondering what it was. When can we have a good rest? That would be the best. Hong Fan protested. Chun Ong ignored him and continued to introduce to everyone. This is the stimulant version 1. 2. I injected the stimulant into the blood clan's body and extracted and analyzed the reaction hormone and chemical substances produced. Combining it with ancient Egyptian blessing-type magic, I finally developed the highly effective and low side effect stimulant version 1. 2. It combines high-quality sleep and deep meditation with stimulant ingredient. It can stimulate your work efficiency to a greater extent. Chun Ong spoke very excitedly, but the people listening below felt a chill. Everyone could only comfort themselves by hypnotizing themselves. At least this version also provides sleeping services. At this time, Chun Ang's next words were even more hair-raising. With this stimulant, your sleep time can be reduced to 1 hour, and you can save another 2 hours to devote to work. Everyone was speechless. Due to Chun Ang's usual tyranny, they did not dare to resist on the surface. They could only roll their eyes in their hearts. Chun Ong then introduced them to the stimulant recovery hormone of the blood clan, the recovery serum, the protease for healing wounds, and other byproducts. Finally, he introduced the main body of their research. Next is the most important topic and the main body of our research, the blood clan itself. Currently, both the expansion of our forces and the improvement of the combat power of our teams have reached a bottleneck. The reason why I asked you to stop expanding and turn to stability is that I have found a breakthrough point to break through the bottleneck. That is the blood clan's embrace ability, as well as the ability to control their descendants and turn them into blood slaves. With the help of biotechnology and ancient Egyptian magic, it will not be difficult for us to reproduce the blood clan on a large scale. This natural dominance ability can control our puppets better than remote-controlled bombs and quickly spread our influence. Moreover, the blood clan's attribute of longevity can make our subordinates and forces more loyal, and at the same time increase their combat power. In addition to the mummies and the undead, whose potential has already been fully exploited, we can add a force with unlimited potential, the blood race, to modify and upgrade our forces. Chun Ang's words made everyone very expectant, but he still made a turn. But the only thing we lack is a real blood clan. Zhang Ziqiang was confused. Didn't you say that you have developed that vampire virus number 1? Also, you have already turned Terence into a blood clan. If we control him, we can control the other descendants of the blood clan. If you think he is unreliable, you can also turn a newcomer into a blood clan. Chun Ong shook his head and said, as I said, The virus modifies more humans with the characteristics of the blood clan, not real blood clan. We need a real blood clan. Although Terence and I have already studied how to convert into a blood clan, I need a blood clan that is more powerful. I think some of you can volunteer to be a blood clan's experimental subject and obtain the power of the original blood clan, which is the power of the blood clan. Chun Ong explained the difference to them. At present, the blood breeds in the prime god space are roughly divided into 3 systems. One is virus modification, such as the blood breeds in the legend of Evernight. They originate from perfect blood and are infected by the bat virus, forming the blood breed virus. There is also the blade hunter, which is also a blood clan virus. We can call this type of blood clan virus. The second type is a different kind of life form, such as the blood clan of Twilight City. They belong to a different species from human beings. They are fundamentally different from human beings. Their abilities do not originate from viral infection, but from the genes themselves. The blood clan bloodline strengthened by God's dimension belongs to this type of blood clan, which is also the source of the bloodline of the leader of the prayer team. We can call them the different blood clan. The last type, and also the most powerful, is the legendary blood clan. Their power originates from curses. The representative is the famous count of the blood clan, Dracula, and the ancestor of the blood clan, Cain. They are not like the first 2 types of blood clan, which can be explained scientifically. The essence of this blood clan's power originates from magic and mystery. From the legends of the blood clan, we can know that their power originates from curses. There are many legends of the blood clan, but there are 3 mainstream versions. The first one is the Impaler, Count Dracula. Dracula was a Christian hero who fought against the Ottoman Empire. He was widely respected and was said to be loved by God. But when he was fighting for Christendom, his lover died tragically because of a conspiracy. Count Dracula, who returned to the castle, cursed God angrily and pierced the holy image of Jesus with his knight's spear. God himself cursed Dracula. He caused the holy image of Jesus to bleed. Dracula went forward and drank the blood of the Son of God. From then on, he was cursed and lived on blood. His soul could never return to heaven. The second one is the legend of Cain. According to Judaism, the eldest son of Adam and Eve, Cain, killed his younger brother because of jealousy. In order to punish Cain, God cursed him and made everyone abandon him. At the same time, he was made immortal and lived on sucking blood. Hence, the true lord of the blood clan, Cain. Zhang Ziqiang suddenly understood. These legends are related to curses, so another way to obtain the blood clan's bloodline is to receive the curse of God. Chun Ong nodded. The stronger the curse, the stronger the power of the blood clan. That's why those who are not afraid of light, silver, garlic, or crosses are trash. While getting rid of these weaknesses, they also get rid of the source of the blood clan's power. The curse. That's why God's space strengthens the blood clan's bloodline, but it doesn't have the great power and immortality of the real blood clan. The stronger and more vicious the curse, the more pain the cursed will suffer, the more power they will get, and the greater their potential. That kind of castrated version of the bloodline will also cut off their inner potential, reducing this bloodline to a mediocre existence. Dracula was powerful because he was once a hero of Christendom. His betrayal caused God to personally curse him and become the true lord of the blood clan. And blood-sucking and photophobia are the most important contents of the curse. It's these that bring about the powerful power of falling into darkness. I learned ancient Egyptian magic, and there's no lack of such spells to curse the enemy. Even Imidon, who we have to deal with, was also because of the most vicious curse on himself and Egypt when he was being bitten by insects. That's why he was still able to reincarnate after thousands of years and obtain greater power than before. Chapter 604. So, the transformation you want the newbies to undergo is the transformation of the cursed blood clan? Zhang Ziqiang asked in shock. Qin Ong shook his head and said, Not only that, but I don't need to spend so much effort on such a simple experiment. What I really want to transform is a combination of the advantages of these three types of blood clan, a more powerful and evil blood clan with more extreme characteristics. It should have the potential of the cursed blood clan, the controllability of the mutated blood clan, and the ability to spread the virus of the blood clan. It should be a combination of the advantages of the three types of blood clan. Will such a transformation be dangerous? Lin Gang, who had been silent for a long time, was unexpectedly the first to ask this question. Although he didn't have a sense of presence in the reincarnation team, as an ordinary person who had been in society for a long time, he knew the consequences of not showing his corresponding value. The risk is very high. Chen Ong didn't lie to everyone. What can be done without risk? Zhang Ziqiang sighed and said, in God's space, what kind of power can be obtained without risk? Doing missions is risky, and there is a possibility of death in every plot world. In order to obtain power, everyone is like crazy. Being experimented on can obtain such a powerful bloodline. Newbies, this is an opportunity that many people can only dream of. Zhang Ziqiang could be considered a person who had seen the world, but everything Chen Ong said still shocked him. In God's space, power was everything. For someone like Chen Ong who could obtain power through his own research and even bestow power to others, the meaning behind this could be said to be shocking. Among all the powerhouses he had seen, this mysterious Professor Chen was the existence closest to the essence of power. I have the genetic sequence of the captain of the prayer team. Through magic rituals and biochemical transformation, I can fuse his power and genes into his blood. Through modulation and transformation, I can purify the genetic sequence of the blood so that it carries all the genetic information and power of the infectious species of the blood clan. Then, I can inject this primordial blood into the experimental body. I will use the altar and the petri dish to fuse with this power from both a biological and a magical perspective. He will obtain all of the bloodline of the captain of the prayer team and become a foreign blood tribe member. Of course, before this, he will have to be infected by the vampire number 1 virus to lay a good foundation for this strengthening. Only with the virus early modifications will he have a higher chance of survival. Then, in the city of the dead, I will use the pharaoh's corpse to trigger the curse of the pharaohs and priests of the past generations in the city of the dead. I will blaspheme and torture the souls and remains of the pharaohs, humiliate Anubis and the sun god Ra, causing them to cast 2 important curses. Anubis will curse the souls of the test subjects to be inferior to the underworld, while the sun god Ra will curse the test subjects to be hated by the sun. Finally, the pharaoh cursed the experimental subjects to live on blood. The curses cast by the pharaohs and even the ancient Egyptian gods should be enough to allow the test subjects to obtain extremely powerful strength. Although it is difficult to project the power of the gods into the human world due to the restrictions of the world, the curse of the souls of the 2 gods and the incarnated pharaoh of the ancient Egyptian gods should be enough to allow the test subjects to reach the sky in a single bound and obtain power no less than that of Dracula the Impaler. After listening to Chen Ong's crazy idea, Hong Fan said faintly, I'm tempted after listening to it. After going through 4 worlds, my power is not even comparable to that of one of Dracula's vampire brides. It's too easy for an experiment to easily obtain such great power. It's not easy. Chen Ong sneered. To fight against the terrible curse that has accumulated in the city of the dead for thousands of years, and to face the pharaohs and even the curses of Anubis and Ra, the risks are incalculable. It's not enough to describe it as a narrow escape. Moreover, there will be intense pain. Those who are not strong enough will easily be consigned to eternal damnation. Zhang Ziqiang still raised a question. Didn't you promise Terence not to disturb the pharaoh's soul? If we do this, it will be a complete fallout with the Guardian tribe. Chen Ong replied in a strange tone. In fact, he was the one who came up with the idea. When the time comes to trigger the Pharaoh's curse, we still need him to cooperate with us. I originally just wanted to squeeze out Immoden's curse. In the process of sealing him, I wanted to find a way to turn his resentment towards Cairo and the 10 curses into a curse against the experimental subject. But Terence told me that if we were to do it, we had to make it big news. How could a piece of trash like Immoden compare to the 1,000-year curse of the Pharaoh in the city of the dead? So I thought, in for a penny, in for a pound. Since we've already offended him, we might as well drag Anubis and Ra into it, borrow their power, and imitate the way God cursed Dracula. So it was a safer idea, but the two of you encouraged each other and made such a terrible thing. Hong Fan said with a bewildered look. Chen Ong asked, if it were you, what would you choose? Hong Fan thought about it and sighed. If it were me, I would also make it big. Anyway, it's already a narrow escape. What's the point of getting power if it's not strong enough? Even if I have to die, I'll pull the emperor down. Zhang Ziqiang still raised a question. But there's one thing. Vampires belong to God. Would the Egyptian gods not be very proficient in business? What if they screw it up? We chose the wrong god, so why don't we let God curse? Isn't there also the British? Chen Ong said sincerely, England is a Protestant country. Generally speaking, the Vatican that God manifests to curse belongs to Catholicism. Both of them say that the other is heretical. And who told you that vampires belong to God? The earliest legend of vampires came from Egypt. Instead, it's the Western Vatican that's suspected of copying it. The Egyptian goddess Sekhmet is famous for her bloodthirst. According to the Egyptian Book of Death, if the part of the soul called Ka doesn't receive enough offerings, it will leave the tomb to suck blood. In Egyptian mythology, the Lord of Power, Seth, was the brother of Osiris. In the oldest Egyptian mythology, he was the biggest enemy of Osiris and Horus, Anubis's father. Because of jealousy, he once again killed his brother, the god of the underworld, Osiris, at a banquet and gouged out one of Horus' eyes. What will you think of when you hear this story? The story of Cain and Abel? That's right. Seth and Osiris are the predecessors of Cain and Abel. The Bible copied the relevant legends from Egyptian mythology, just like how Christmas copied the ancient Roman Saturnalia. In order to cover things up, in the Bible, Cain and Abel's brother is also called Seth. The legendary Seth is the real origin of the Blood Clan. The legend of vampires actually originated from Egypt. Chapter 605. After listening to Chen Ang's words, Zhang Ziqiang's expression suddenly became strange. His face alternated between white and green, as if he was making some crucial decision. Hong Fan, his old brother, saw him like this and wisely did not disturb him. After a while, Zhang Ziqiang seemed to have made a great decision. He handed a test tube filled with red blood to Chen Ong. If you have this, will it be of great help to you? Chen Ong took the test tube and saw the creator's notification. Perfect blood weakened, C-rank tool. The blood of Michael, the ancestor of the perfect blood, the descendant of Alexander Corvinus. Due to intergenerational inheritance, the blood genes have been weakened. It no longer has immortality and immunity to diseases, but it still contains a part of the perfect blood's secret. It can be used to strengthen or fuse bloodlines. Reduce the rejection when bloodlines are fused. Chen Ong looked at the perfect blood in his hand with a serious expression. He raised his head to look at Zhang Ziqiang and suddenly asked, "This thing should be your secret treasure, right? Are you really willing to let me experiment on it?" Zhang Ziqiang took a deep breath and turned his head away from the perfect blood in Chen Ang's hand. To prevent his heart from cramping, he held back his regret and asked Chen Ong, "Are you sure you can use this thing well?" Chen Ong did not deny it. Scientific research has always been unpredictable, but it's still difficult for me to waste such a precious research material. With it, inducing the blood race virus from Legend of the Night won't be a problem. Then the expected experimental body will have the effect of 3 blood race enhancements fusing into one. It has great potential. That's good, Zhang Ziqiang muttered dejectedly. He laughed self-deprecatingly. This thing won't be of much use in my hands. I was originally prepared to use it to strengthen a more dangerous bloodline, but after so long, I still haven't found the opportunity. It's more valuable in your hands than in mine. You can use it. Chen Ong revealed a rare smile and said, indeed. In your hands, this is just a one-time item. But in my hands, it's a breeding ground for countless bloodlines. What a pity. If this is Alexander's perfect blood, I'm confident that I can make it into the mother of viruses, combining many bloodlines to create universal versions of viruses. At that time, I will be the second largest supplier of bloodlines apart from the god. I will be able to create virus serums of any bloodline. Chenong sighed and said, but not now. This tube of blood had been modified by the main god. Although there was no difference in the genes, after I studied it, I wouldn't receive the treatment of the main god's assistance in modifying it. Even if I can replicate millions of this blood, without the recognition of the Lord God, it will only be a special genetic sample. There will no longer be such an ability to promote the fusion of bloodlines. Chenong grabbed the perfect blood and left in a hurry. After leaving behind the words that he wanted to go into seclusion to do experiments again, he locked himself in the basement laboratory again. Chen-Ong first broke through the genetic replication problem of the perfect blood and successfully cloned the same blood sample. To his surprise, the main god actually recognized his work. Perfect blood, weakened replication, an E-grade item, a copy of the blood of Michael, the descendant of Alexander Corvinus, the progenitor of the perfect blood. Due to intergenerational inheritance, the blood's genes were weakened, and it no longer had the ability to live forever and be immune to diseases. This was a clone copy. Although because of the superb level of cloning, it did not lose many genes, it was still weaker than the original perfect blood. It contained part of the perfect blood secret, which could be used to slightly strengthen or fuse bloodlines. It could slightly reduce the rejection reaction during the fusion of bloodlines. Apart from the effect having the adjectives slightly and slightly, there was no essential difference from the original product that Zhang Ziqiang had given him. This meant that the perfect blood that Chen Ong had casually created already had considerable value. It was recognized as a commodity that could be traded in the main god's space. However, Chen Ong was not satisfied with this. Pure technical work was far from satisfying a researcher like Chen Ong. By repeatedly creating such things as commodities, Chen Ong would become a skilled businessman and not a researcher. This was an insult to scientists. Scientists were always pursuing the unknown, and they were never technical workers. The perfect blood's characteristics were very unique. It could change diseases, or more precisely, it could fuse and devour the DNA of viruses and bacteria to produce resistant components and fuse with viruses to form antibodies. The 3 sons of the Corvinus, the progenitor of the perfect blood, had inherited a part of the perfect blood's characteristics. However, due to hereditary reasons, this characteristic had been weakened. When the virus invaded, the perfect blood could not produce perfect antibodies. Instead, it fused with the virus's genes and achieved a state of symbiosis. Alexander's 2 sons, William and Marcus, had been bitten by a wolf and a bat respectively. They fused with the wolf and bat's viruses, and at the same time, fused with the DNA of the 2 creatures, producing 2 species, the virus vampire and the virus werewolf. And Chen Ong wanted to stimulate the perfect blood's ancestral atavism characteristic and display its ability to fuse with viruses. However, this time, he did not use a virus extracted from a wolf or bat. Instead, he used a virus that had been modified and extracted from an abnormal creature like the Blood Clan. It was different from the weakened Vampire No. 1's highly toxic virus, Vampire No. 2. Because after the perfect blood left the body, its activity was greatly weakened. After collecting enough experimental data, Chen-Ong had no choice but to synthesize the perfect blood's hematopoietic stem cells and move them into the body of the captain of the prayer team, replacing the original spinal cord. Then, he completed the fusion of the vampire number 2 virus and the perfect blood in his body and repeatedly extracted the antibodies from the spinal cord. In the end, Chen-Ong obtained what he wanted: the Blood Clan virus, a B-rank tool. The perfect blood had been modified by scientists and injected into the body of a real vampire, absorbing its gene fragments and fusing them into a virus. It could bestow the bloodline of the Blood Clan, scientific, and was immune to sunlight, garlic, and galactic rejection. However, it was still weak against high-intensity ultraviolet rays. When he saw this result, even though Zhang Ziqiang was quite calm, he could not help but gasp for a moment. The sudden surprise swept through his whole body, and Hong Fan was even more excited as he gripped the test tube tightly. He walked the path of an agile assassin, and now, in the face of increasingly intense and highly confrontational missions, he also felt powerless. The Blood Clan bloodline was also a bloodline that was extremely suitable for him. The elegant and agile Blood Clan was obviously more suitable for assassins operating in the dark. The reason why he did not show interest before was because Chen-Ang's empty words made it difficult for people to believe that such a crazy plan could succeed. However, now that he had the endorsement of the Lord God, things were different. At the very least, he could get a B-rank Blood Clan bloodline. At the second report after Chen-Ong completed the experiment, everyone's enthusiasm for this bloodline exceeded Chen-Ang's expectations. Propping up his eyes and looking at the two men standing in front of him, Chen-Ong wondered, "Are you really willing to be the test subjects of this experiment?" Hong Fan nodded and said, "Yes. There are not many bloodlines that are suitable for me, and the potential and strength of a triple-strengthened Blood Clan is first class in the Lord God's space. I have no reason to let go of this opportunity. As for the danger," he smiled sarcastically, "everything in the Lord God's space is not dangerous. I only know that if I don't become stronger, the danger I will face will be even more terrible." Lin Gang also nodded. "I only have a handful of strength, and I can't do the work like Xiao Li, Xiao Zhao, and CEO Xiao. After thinking about it, if I don't fight, what value do I have in this team? You can take me in now, but when this mission is over, I will still die, right? I shouldn't have taken this opportunity with Brother Hong. But I really have no other choice." After confirming that the two men were willing, Chen-Ong no longer cared about their other thoughts and directly replied, "Now there is no Blood Clan virus. Both of you can accept the first step of strengthening, but from the second step, you will have to directly devour all the blood genetic information of a foreign Blood Clan with the help of the divine curse, and prepare for the third step of the state of death." Chapter 606. The petri dish strengthened by the bloodline virus looked like an Egyptian coffin. Lin Gang and Hong Fan's pale faces could be seen through the translucent lid. Chen-Ong was carefully adjusting the altar. Due to the limitation of the instrument, many steps needed spells to complete. Thanks to his identity as a Grand Arcanist, Chen-Ong could do it with ease. Terence stood at the side and watched all of this. He was no longer as weak and pale as before. His hair was still white, but it was filled with the luster of vitality. The age spots under his skin had disappeared without a trace. Although he was still pale and bloodless, his wrinkles had surprisingly disappeared. If it wasn't for his calm, wise temperament and calm eyes, it would be very difficult to think that he was an old man over 60 years old. His eyes were amazingly bright. Abundant spiritual power could be seen from his eyes. "How is it? How have your spells changed after becoming a bloodline virus?" Chen-Ong asked him with a smile. Terence answered gently, "Most of the spells that involve death and curses have been strengthened, but some of the blessings have been weakened. With the strange energy in my body, I can cast many spells. The bloodline is indeed a race suitable for casting spells. All in all, it's great. But the desire for blood is a bit troublesome. Drinking blood is the core power of the bloodline. I don't think you have any concerns, Chen Ong asked in surprise. Because of Terrence's special identity, when they strengthened the bloodline virus, they also tried to curse Terrence. At the cost of hundreds of lives and blood, Chen Ong borrowed the divine power of Anubis and cursed Terrence. Terrence gained a part of the power to curse the bloodline in advance. Because of this, Terrence's magic power was greatly increased. Hearing that, Terrence sighed, "For immortality, I lost my conscience. The fear of death made me abandon the mission of my clan. I deserve to be cursed." It was not difficult for Chen Ong to persuade Terrence. As a scholar, it was hard for Terrence to have any reverence for traditions and belief. As an old man, he was always afraid of death. However, before Chen Ong could persuade him, Terrence, who had already guessed Chen Ang's plan, joined Chen Ong like a bird flying to the woods. For immortality, he was willing to become an evil bloodline. When he found out the core secret of cursing the bloodline, in order to make himself stronger and more immortal, Terrence did not hesitate to betray the city of the dead that he had guarded for half his life, the pharaoh's mausoleum. According to the agreement, he was another one of Chen Ang's experimental subjects. As a traitor, he was cursed by the Egyptian gods and the pharaoh. While the two were being strengthened, Chen Ong took the opportunity to understand the progress of the team. Now, there were three major forces in Cairo that could intervene in the plot. Terrence, who had a very special position among the pharaoh's guardians, sought to cooperate with Chen Ong. Although it was likely that they would fall out in the end, they were not hostile at the moment and could still borrow some of their power. After so many days of tracking, Zhang Ziqiang finally had a clue about the whereabouts of their leader, Half. He was currently in London, but the second in command of the organization, the burly black man Locke, was currently in Cairo. As for the important hidden forces, the colonial government and the Suez Canal Company, more than half of the colonial government had been infiltrated by the reincarnators. In Cairo, Chen Ang's words were more effective than the governor's, and the waters of the Suez Canal Company were very deep. Hong Fan and Zhang Ziqiang had repeatedly probed, but they had only infiltrated a few peripheral members. Although it seemed that the Suez Canal Company had daily operations and management, everyone knew that the real decision-maker was the board of directors behind the International Suez Canal Company. The board of directors, composed of Britain and France, was far away in Europe. There were only a large number of British troops stationed in Egypt, and the Egyptian colonial government could not interfere with the management of the canal. The complexity of the situation made it difficult for Hong Fan, who lacked IQ, to judge. He didn't even know who the key figure was. After reading a lot of information, Chen Ong finally determined the key. The Dryset family and Viscount Rosebery are the key figures of the British in Cairo. Zhao, who was next to him, couldn't help but frown. But, Dr. Chen, why should we provoke the British? According to the plot, they won't affect us at all, will they? But I'm not going to follow the plot at all, Chen Ong replied. His words made Zhang Ziqiang and others very nervous, and they quickly asked, "Why? Have you thought about it? This time we easily wiped out the hostile reincarnators and mastered such a huge force. If we push on like this, it will be as easy as turning over our hands to deal with Imidon. Won't we be able to easily harvest a lot of reward points and items? Is there such a good thing in God's space?" Chen Ong raised a question that made Zhang Ziqiang frown. He pondered and said, "So, God will definitely increase the difficulty. Yes, the best opportunity is to put a hostile reincarnation team on Imidon's side after Imidon's seal is lifted. This time, the strength of our enemy can be imagined. They will be able to break through by force. They are a team that we have accumulated so many advantages to barely fight against." Zhang Ziqiang couldn't help but look solemn. "So you're going to do this? Muddy the waters a little and expand the confrontation. In other words, Change the big plot of Imidon's attack on Egypt with 10 natural disasters into a three-party confrontation between Imidon, the Guardians, the British Suez Company, and the colonial government. Suez Company and the Pharaoh's Mausoleum Guardian will fight against Imidon and protect Cairo. At the same time, because of Britain's colonial rule and oppression of Egypt, they will certainly not tolerate an armed force that doesn't belong to them threatening Suez shipping. They will definitely have a conflict with the Mausoleum Guardian. The Mausoleum Guardian organization is a local force in Egypt and is naturally welcomed by Egyptians. They will also definitely not like the British forces invading Egypt. At the same time, the High Priest Imidon's men will help Imidon destroy Cairo. The three parties have mutual interests and confront each other, forming a big plot of intense conflict. It is completely possible to increase the input of reincarnators and let God send more reincarnators down to start a team battle. Chapter 607. That night, Lin Gang and Hong Fan succeeded in strengthening themselves. After Chen Ang's inspection, Hong Fan's strengthening of the blood race with the virus was more successful. The skills he learned in the Brotherhood of Assassins were indeed very compatible with the genes of the blood race. Not only were his skills greatly strengthened, but because of the curse Chen Ang cast on him with the lives of 9 men, he now had the spell-like ability of shadow. He could blend into the shadows, and his spirit attribute was also greatly improved. Therefore, Chen Ang used him as a test subject for the next step of the experiment, which was to carry out the strengthening experiment of the alien blood tribe. The experiment would take place tonight. Terence was responsible for hosting a cursing ritual with the help of the magic of the moon, so that the cursed would be repelled by the sun and receive the blessing of the moon. This was also a preparation for the last step of the experiment. Terence stared at Hong Fan, who was tied up in a coffin in the center of the stone altar with jealousy. He muttered, "This is so unfair. I've studied for 50 years to get this little bit of magic. He has surpassed me in just one experiment. Professor Chen, you're too partial to them. I'm already your loyal subordinate, but they don't obey you." Although Terence had received a promise from Chen Ang that he would help him with the cursing ritual, he was still very jealous of Hong Fan's action. After all, they only had the original body of one of the blood clan. After Hong Fan got all the power of this baron, he would far surpass Terence in terms of status and power. Terence had long observed that Chen Ang and the other samsara travelers were only partners, and they were relatively equal when interacting with each other. Although there was a division of priority, Terence felt that a subordinate like him, who had wholeheartedly submitted to Chen Ang, should be more peaceful than a partner, and should be taken care of more. Chen Ang ignored him, and continued to check the divine magic circle under his feet. At the same time, he said to Zhang Ziqiang, "The 30 offerings for Anubis and the 20 materials for the ritual must be separated. I've treated their blood differently. There can be no mistakes during the strengthening process." Zhang Ziqiang nodded. "Okay. But Professor, there's no one left in the prison." Chen Ang turned around and looked at him. "Cairo is such a big city. Will there be a shortage of people? There are not many felons in that prison. Apart from those who are willing to submit to us and pass our screening, there are only 80 or so villains left. After so many days of consumption, what blood sacrifice? Human experiments? Consumables? There's not much left." This time, the kid emptied the stock. As for the population in Cairo, there are indeed a lot of people, but there aren't that many bastards who do all kinds of evil. In addition to those who oppose us and obstruct our expansion, the fact that we are able to last until now is already the result of our countless enemies. Zhang Ziqiang complained like a butler. Now that Hong Fan is involved in the experiment, there's no one to be the main force pulling out the nails. There's no one to help us kidnap those blind idiots. Next, the embrace experiment of the blood breeds will require a large number of people. He pointed to the side. If those people are released, what else can they do other than kill? Besides, it's not a good influence. In the direction that Zhang Ziqiang pointed, there were a few monsters with bat-like faces, drooling and blood-red eyes standing obediently at the door, guarding the place. These things had obviously lost their minds. They were the failed products of the Embrace experiment. Chen Ong simply controlled them and used them as biological weapons. Chen Ong explained, "Don't look down on their brains. They'll be useful soon. I'm going to use them for a vampire mummy experiment. If it's successful, we'll have a new powerful weapon. At that time, I'll make magic talismans that can control them and distribute them." The museum had been transformed into an ancient Egyptian magic experiment center by Chen Ong. In the open space outside the exhibition hall, a stone altar was bathed in the moonlight. The moonlight shone on the center of the altar. Chen Ong made a gesture, and Zhang Ziqiang immediately had someone cut the throats of 20 magic materials. The bodies fell to the ground with a thud, but the muffled sound did not travel too far in the open space. Blood flowed along the reserved trenches and gradually gathered in the center of the altar. Chen Ong stepped on the spices that had been placed in advance. He held a black book and softly read the ancient Egyptian words on it. With his strange intonation, the blood on the altar flowed unnaturally, following the hieroglyphs across the altar and into Hong Fan's coffin. On the coffin, there was a rune that looked like an eye. It resonated with the moonlight and emitted a misty blood-red glow. Chen Ong picked up a sacrificial blade dagger from the plate that Terence was holding. The obsidian dagger reflected the faint moonlight. One could clearly see that the dagger looked exactly like the hieroglyphs that represented life, Ankh. This dagger, known as the symbol of life, was pierced by Chen Ong into the chest of the leader of the prayer team on the altar. He screamed in pain, and deep wrinkles slowly appeared on his body. It was as if all the water in his body was being sucked out. On the rune dagger of Ankh, a line of blood flowed down the dagger like a living thing. It flowed along the pre-prepared trenches and flowed into the coffin that Hong Fan was sleeping in. Chen Ong used another dagger to pierce into Hong Fan's heart. The line of blood flowed along the dagger and flowed into Hong Fan's heart. Hong Fan was awake when he heard the voice of the Lord God. "Unknown energy is changing your body. You have been infected by a cursed ritual. An unknown bloodline is covering your body." Then, the bloodlines of the 20 people also flowed into the narrow space where Hong Fan was. The blood drowned him, but he could feel his body cheering. The thirst of the devourer's philosophical blood. The fishy smell was so fragrant in his nose. He could feel that there was a cold and warm energy in the blood that flowed into his heart. As Chen Ong pulled out the dagger from his heart, the wound quickly healed. Its wound quickly healed, but the organ would never beat again. Hong Fan felt that his body temperature was decreasing bit by bit. He saw a lot of clear and noisy images from the blood that surrounded him. It seemed to be the memory of the sacrifice who offered the blood. He saw Zhang Ziqiang touching his neck, and saw Chen Ong reading that book expressionlessly. Finally, he felt that the essence of his life was changing. At this time, a strange voice came into his ears. It was Chen Ong chanting softly, "The abandoned Son of Man, the betrayer of the Sun, Menha prayer, may he be tortured forever. Anubis will forever reject his soul from entering the underworld. Ra, the god of the sun, will prevent the sun from blessing him. The hatred of the undead, the murmur of the dead, will torment him forever. You will feel that the wine that enters your mouth will turn into rotting liquid, and the fragrance of the 5 grains will turn into rotten soil. You will only be able to feed on blood for eternity. You will have no children, no burial place, and no time to sleep. Only darkness will protect you. Khan, the god of the moon, may he watch over you." After the voice fell silent, Hong Fan felt a vast and cold power engraved on his soul. He felt that the curse was slowly changing his nature. While it was giving him pain, it was also increasing his power. Inexplicably, he learned a lot of dark knowledge and incantations from these rituals. His blood was now filled with dark magic. Hong Fan pushed open the coffin made of alloy. His huge strength even left a palm print on the 15 mm thick steel plate. He leaped into the air and turned into a black fog in midair. In a trance, he appeared in front of Chen Ong. Hong Fan could feel the huge power in his body. He even felt a little arrogant. This powerful feeling even made him have a violent impulse. He had a twisted mentality that wanted to kill this ant in front of him. Chen Ong looked at him calmly, and a chill from the bottom of his heart woke Hong Fan up in the blink of an eye. Chen Ong asked, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Hong Fan instinctively smiled and said, "Nothing, nothing. Very good, very good. I just couldn't control the power in my body and swelled up a little. I'm awake now. I'm awake now." Looking at the fawning smile on Li Mingyi's face that was almost sticking out his tongue, the rookies, who had been frightened and stiff by his cold magic power, immediately woke up from the powerful illusion. Li Mingyi lamented, "This is the reason why I don't want to become a sanguine. So what if I become a baron?" One look from the doctor and I became obedient. Zhao Yingqi thought back to the mysterious and powerful vampires in her memory and sighed. "He ruined my beautiful memories of the vampires." Zhang Ziqiang pulled the old man to a corner and said in a low voice, "Ah Hong, your performance is simply a disgrace to the vampires." Hong Fan said numbly, "You don't know, but the senses of the vampires are very sharp. I was just about to be cocky. One look from him, and I'm afraid from the very core of my genes." Hong Fan, who had succeeded in his transformation, had the powerful strength of a vampire baron from the very beginning. Moreover, because he had combined the abilities of the viral vampires, he had a special ability to infect and control lower-level vampires. The virus that carried the genes of the vampires could spread its descendants wantonly like the viral vampires and infect many people. However, it also had the powerful control ability of the elders of the vampires over their descendant. This kind of control originated from the genes of the bloodline. Hong Fan could feel that if he wanted a descendant to commit suicide, all he needed was a look. This was a kind of spiritual restraint. The elders had the ability to permanently hypnotize their descendants and seize their lives. However, unlike the descendants of the vampires who needed to expend a large amount of his own strength, the lower-level vampires that Hong Fan infected only had the viral vampires. They were agile and stronger than ordinary people. They could smell blood and obtain memories from blood. The only power that seemed supernatural was the ability to hypnotize humans. At the same time, their lifespan was only 3 times that of humans. Of course, Hong Fan could also choose to expend a large amount of his own strength to create a descendant that also had the magic of the vampires. Chen Ong turned around and handed a pale yellow syringe to Zhang Ziqiang. He said to him, "This is a vampire virus that I made using Hong Fan's genes. It can infect the viral vampires and still be controlled by Hong Fan at the same time. The only special thing is that I've modified the genes related to the virus so that these vampires have the ability to walk under the sun, but correspondingly, the power obtained will be a little less." Zhang Ziqiang was puzzled. "Why do you need this? Just let Ah Hong bite him." Chen Ong laughed. "First, it's not hygienic. I don't think Hong Fan wants to bite those smelly Egyptians and white people one by one. Second, our people can't always move in the dark. There has to be a batch that can see the light. With these, I want to become the underground emperor of Egypt in 3 days. Can you do it?" Zhang Ziqiang nodded. "Yes." Then he laughed wretchedly. But based on my understanding of Hong, he must have a reason to bite some people personally. I just saw him paying attention to the new secretary next to me. The vampire's love for the blood of virgins is also an instinct." Chen Ong wasn't surprised. His bodily fluids contain the virus. In theory, anyone who comes into contact with his bodily fluids will become a vampire. If any woman becomes a vampire without going through the embrace, you can catch her and let me study her. Chapter 608. It was only a few days before the curse of the City of the Dead was weakened. According to the original plot, O'Connor should have been on his way. However, now that the Samsara team controlled nearly 90% of the manpower and material resources in Cairo, they naturally did not need to take a boat downstream and then slowly walk to the City of the Dead like in the original plot. The Egyptian military had prepared more than a dozen transport planes, ready to transport the expedition team to the desert at any time. The expedition team had naturally been greatly expanded. The expedition team of at least 50 people included the Blood Clan's combat troops, the divine priests led by Terence, the test subjects requested by Chen Ong, and the Samsara team. Of course, there were also the three unlucky people, O'Connor and Evelyn. If the men in black who had sniped O'Connor in the original plot had appeared, half of the team would be non-human and could beat the sh*t out of him. In this way, the reward points for the main mission would reach an astonishing 50,000. It was not that Zhang Ziqiang did not want more, but Chen Ong had told him that this was already the limit that the Lord God could accept. Although it was still a bit excessive now, it was roughly equal to their efforts in creating momentum. If Zhang Ziqiang dared to pull out an expedition team of thousands of people, the Lord God might be able to create an apocalyptic desert storm. The night in Cairo was exceptionally tranquil. Wherever the lights were, there was a sense of peace and harmony. The people there rarely felt this kind of peace and happiness. Chen Ong watched everything from the top floor of the museum. The God's Realm team's hard work couldn't be separated from what he had seen. Now everyone knew that the inconspicuous prison in the city was where the real authority of Cairo was located. Chen Ong had created a hieroglyph that looked like an eye, the Eye of Horus organization, which became the true owner of the city in the eyes of the people of Cairo. The lowly gangsters who used to go in and out of the slums and wandering in the dark corners of the streets had disappeared without a trace. Because Chen Ong needed test subjects and magic materials, the shortage of the prison's felons had caused Zhang Ziqiang to focus on the streets and alleys of Cairo, even those who had surrendered to Chen Ong. Those who did not obey the new law were also quietly cleaned up. With the control engraved in the blood, Chen Ong no longer needed these trash to control the city for him, so these trash would return to where they should be. As for other criminals, Chen Ong did not mind making use of them. Suddenly, the colonial city of Cairo had a good security that even the most developed areas in the world did not have. The people of Cairo knew that the mysterious people with the Eye of Horus symbol were now wandering in the dark street. They were the protectors of their safety. They could safely pass by these people without worrying about being dragged into dark alleys because they were too beautiful or well-dressed. Everyone knew that the Eye of Horus was controlled by a group of people known as the Council of Elders. They imagined that these people must be the wisest, kindest, and fairest beings in Egypt, and that they were the guardians of the city. And the new order ruled by Chen Ong was quietly germinating. In the street that Chen Ong was watching, O'Connell was limping through the darkness with difficulty. When he saw the men in black standing guard at the end of the street, O'Connell instinctively shrank back. Then, he suddenly realized that he was not running for his life. He had already obtained his freedom. The terrifying yellow man had temporarily released him. Smelling the unpleasant smell of life on the street, O'Connor suddenly felt a little touched. This was the smell of freedom. He finally walked in front of a building and pushed the door open. Inside, a blonde woman with braids saw him and frowned unconsciously. She asked O'Connor, "What are you doing here?" O'Connor shrugged. "They let me out. But I thought about it. I have nowhere to go, so I came here." After all, Evelyn was a kind-hearted person, and after O'Connor had washed up, he really matched her aesthetic standards. So although her tone was not good, she still said, "Go to the room where the servant sleeps in the back. I'm telling you, you're not allowed to run around." At this time, someone behind him suddenly said in surprise, "O'Connor?" Evelyn's brother, Jonathan, saw O'Connor and went up to greet him. "You ran out from there?" Oh my God! With you, we can get rid of those people and do it alone. O'Connor replied embarrassedly, in fact, I was released by them. I just need to return to the place where they are going to set off in the morning of the day after tomorrow. And I don't think we can get rid of them and do it alone. Danny is still in their hands. They will find the capital of the dead sooner or later, and now Cairo is full of their people. O'Connor wondered, I've only been in there for 2 months. What's going on? Evelyn said listlessly, Are you talking about the Eye of Horus? Obviously, as you can see, they suddenly appeared in the streets and alleys one day, and they took control of the city. The Egyptians thought that they were a local resistance organization, and they fought on behalf of the Egyptians against the British. Now they have quietly won. The local people are very welcoming of these people and are hostile to the British and French with them. Also, it is said that they will take back the Suez Canal and make Egypt strong again. Evelyn whispered the last sentence into O'Connor's ear. O'Connor turned his face and brushed past Evelyn's face. The tingling of the man's beard made Evelyn panic inexplicably, and her cheeks flushed red. Jonathan didn't notice his sister's abnormality at all. Instead, he bragged, I'm very familiar with them. I have a good brother who joined the Eye of Horus. Their internal rules are very strict. He told me that they often kill those who don't follow the rules and bring the corpses back to the prison where you are. Speaking of which, didn't you escape from there? Jonathan became excited and asked, Do you know any inside information? O'Connor looked at Evelyn's pretty face and was a little lost in thought. When he heard Jonathan ask him, he hurriedly answered clumsily, Oh, I might have seen some of them. There are some mysterious yellow people among them. I saw them knock down many prison guards and occupy the place. They are very mysterious and very cruel. They control others by installing explosives on people. Jonathan looked at his right kneecap and suddenly lamented, We can't escape. Evelyn suddenly said angrily, Yes, God. I've never seen such an unreasonable person. I just came to ask you for directions, and they captured me and inserted an explosive directly into my leg. Are they crazy? I'm just a small archaeology student, and Jonathan is just a gangster. Jonathan interrupted, Sister, you can't say that about me. Evelyn ignored him and hugged her face and cried bitterly. She sobbed and said, They forced me to find the city of the dead and kidnapped the curator. It's all because of you. If it wasn't for that stupid thing you brought, we wouldn't have ended up like this. We are leaving the day after tomorrow. I don't even know if I can come back alive. O'Connell immediately fell silent. He looked at Evelyn's crying face and suddenly felt the courage that he hadn't felt in a long time. He looked at Evelyn and said seriously, I will bring you back alive. I swear on my life. Evelyn suddenly raised her head and looked at O'Connor, who solemnly promised in front of her. She gritted her teeth and said, You'd better take care of yourself. After saying that, she went back to her room without looking back. Jonathan was still asking O'Connor, Do those people have business credibility? They promised me 20 gold bars after this, as long as I obey their orders. I think they are exaggerating. 20 gold bars, who would believe that? Chapter 609. The small library attached to the museum was a little small. All kinds of ancient Egyptian materials and books were stacked on the bookshelves. Evelyn had accidentally knocked down all the bookshelves here, and Zhao was responsible for finding someone to clean them up. The relevant information collected by the Eye of Horus was transferred here for Chen Ong to read at any time. At this time, Chen Ong lit the modified incandescent lamp and flipped through the corresponding information on the desk. A very important task of the Eye of Horus was to collect information related to ancient Egyptian relics, including the most critical clues in the second plot of the mummy, the bracelet of death and the spear of judgment. If there were other relevant relics, they would also be ordered to collect them. Chen Ong would take some time every day to identify relevant relics and check if there were clues related to ancient Egyptian magic items. One of the reasons Chen Ong named the organization, founded by the reincarnation team Horus's Eye, was that the organization had obtained some clues related to the legendary Egyptian artifact, the Eye of Horus. Chen Ong flipped through the relevant books while playing with a golden short staff. With a twist, it was a golden spear. Chen Ong threw this thing to Xiao Bolong next to him and said, "Of course this is a replica. It should have been copied by a later pharaoh for fun. The runes on it are relatively weak. It's not a demigod artifact with divinity at all. I can even copy this kind of thing." Xiao Bolong glanced at the attributes of the Spear of Judgment in his hand. Spear of Judgment, replica, sea-level equipment, replica, stab damage increased by 40%. Those who are injured by this spear will undergo a constitution check every hour. If the check fails, the damage will be increased by 20%. Those who are injured by this spear may be tracked by the spear wielder. Although he already knew about Chen Ang's ability, Xiao Bolong was still shocked by Chen Ang's words. He had asked Zhang Ziqiang that sea-level equipment with such good attributes was already the main equipment of most veterans in God's space. Such a replica of the Spear of Judgment was also worth nearly 5,000 reward points in the space. Zhang Ziqiang was very surprised to see that he could collect such a thing from collecting ancient Egyptian relics. Therefore, Xiao Bolong presented it to Chen Ong, but he didn't expect Chen Ong to be dismissive of it. This also led to the last sentence. This meant that most of the equipment of the veterans in the main god space could be roughly replicated by Chen Ong with some effort. In the Mummy 2 plot, have you located the general area of the temple that O'Connor and Evelyn discovered? The Death God's bracelet that we want is inside. The Spear of Judgment is in the City of the Dead. With these two key locations, we can trigger the plot of the second installment at any time. There's also the Eye of Horus. I suspect that this thing can trigger the plot of Divine War, the Eye of Power. Unlike at the beginning, the organization created by the reincarnators now had a stable foundation and internal pressure to expand with Hong Fan's blood-breed descendants as the backbone. After Hong Fan chose a few key figures for the embrace, the organization was able to develop and grow on its own. The reincarnators also didn't have to do everything by themselves like in the beginning. There was already a foundation of trust in the Eye of Horus organization. Therefore, there was no obstacle to giving part of the work to the indigenous people of the plot world. The collection of information and legendary items related to ancient Egyptian mythology was the responsibility of a few smart and capable upper-level blood breed. Some of them were ministers of the colonial government who had joined the Eye of Horus out of fear of death. Some were local gang leaders who had been forced to join the Eye of Horus due to violence. There were even British garrison officers, famous scholars, and professors. Together, they formed the leadership organization under the reincarnators, the Executive Elders Council. As for the reincarnators, most of them were preparing for the trip to the City of the Dead, including logistical plans, reinforcements, and preparations to prevent enemy reincarnation teams from destroying Cairo. Under the guidance of the ancient Egyptian Divine Master, Terence, several related groups worked together. There was also the infiltration of the Suez Canal Company, the infiltration of the Pharaoh's Tombkeeper, and the control of the Imadan priest organization. Terence himself was the high priest of the Tombkeeper tribe. With him as a spy, the infiltration of the Tombkeeper tribe went smoothly. Many of Terence's admirers and supporters joined the Eye of Horus. After all, on the surface, this was an organization for Egyptian patriots to restore their country. Although the leader of the Tombkeeper Eddie sensed it, he had no reason to stop it. As for the other two organizations, it was a bit troublesome. The local organization of the Suez Canal Company was easy to infiltrate, but the core of the British side was quite troublesome. The Eye of Horus had detected the minions of the Protestant Church, the British nobles, and other forces behind them. On the other hand, Imhotep's priest organization had few core members and was closed off to outsiders. Without a spy like Terence, It would be very troublesome to infiltrate it. Chen Ong was prepared to personally lead a team to deal with these two problems, lest they were about to depart soon and their plans were not yet complete. An assault team had been prepared. The 15 members of the team were chosen from the most combative prisoners and the most elite military police. Hong Fan would personally give them the embrace. Chen Ong had concocted the strengthened version of the blood-tried potion. He had even gone through a cursing ritual organized by Terrence. He had cursed them with the blood and lives of a desert bandit and nearly 50 tough bandits. This caused them to break through and become the elites of the blood race. After this period of adaptation, Hong Fan had already advanced to the rank of Viscount through a lot of killing and blood. As for these people, although they had not reached the level of nobility, they were already at the level of knights. Every one of them was comparable to the senior Samsara travelers of the prayer team. Moreover, they were proficient in combat skills and were not afraid of death. Coupled with the Blood Tribe's unique immortality and the weapons and equipment that Chen Ong had modified, they were more of a threat than Hong Fan to a certain extent. If the prayer team was still around, Chen Ong could easily take care of them head-on. These vampires all knew some basic vampiric magic and Egyptian magic. They also had 9 armed mummies, 2 guardians, a group of sacred beetles, poisonous sand, curse spells, poisonous snakes, poisonous scorpions, and so on. Chen Ong combined the art of voodoo and cultivated a new batch of poisonous creatures that could be used to cast spells. The effect was especially good, so he also matched them. Zhang Ziqiang looked at these pale-faced people hiding under their cloak. The cloaks had been enchanted with a special spell to hide their faces. Only a batch of powerful heavy weapons and guns were carried on their back. There were also daggers and scimitars on their waists. They looked like ghosts and hungry ghosts. Zhang Ziqiang could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. "Are you going to negotiate? Or are you going to exterminate them?" Zhang Ziqiang persuaded Chen Ong, "Such a powerful force is enough to deal with reincarnators. Why bully a group of natives?" Chen Ong asked in reply, "Who told you that natives are easier to deal with than reincarnators?" This time, whether it was meeting Viscount Roseberry, taking control of the Suez Canal Company's branch in Egypt, or dealing with the second-in-command of the Imidan Priests organization, Locke, it was not an easy task. "It's better to bring everyone. I'm used to crushing them all the way. Who would negotiate with them?" Chen Ong turned around and got into the car with his men. They quietly disappeared into the darkness of Cairo. The dock area had always been a place where people from all walks of life mingled in Cairo. It was where the poor porters lived and worked. It was also where the Egyptian river transport was transferred to the Red Sea. Ships passing through the Suez Canal would occasionally stop here. Not far from the dock, there was a relatively flat and lively area. This was Cairo's business district. This was where the wealth of Cairo was concentrated. Sailors from all over the world would come here to buy and spend without restraint. This created a place of abnormal prosperity, but it was also the soil of crime. Many of Chen Eng's test subjects came from here. Later, even the Eye of Horus had to admit that the dock area had its own rules. Arresting criminals and purging order would only destroy the unique order that had been formed over a long period of time. After all, they could not expect every sailor from a foreign ship to behave themselves. They simply delineated this area and prohibited them from bringing this chaos to other parts of Cairo. Then, they sent people to maintain the most basic order and protect the ordinary citizens living here. The sailors would bear the rest of the responsibility. Chapter 610. Locke, the burly black man, was getting drunk in a tavern in the dock area. In addition to being a well-hidden follower of the priest, he was also a rather influential figure in the dock area. But at this time, the atmosphere in the tavern had become a little strange. The new waiter quietly wiped the glasses, and the number of burly men in the tavern increased. They started to dissuade some untactful guests, but they didn't disturb him. It wasn't until there was a commotion outside the tavern that the burly men in the tavern retreated silently. At present, only Locke was left in the entire tavern area. The guests who were chased out curiously looked at the windows, and the guests upstairs also carefully gathered at the stairs to observe. Only the owner of the tavern and 2 new waiters were diligently cleaning up the messy tables and chairs. Then, a hand pushed open the door of the tavern, and Chen Ong strode into the tavern with a group of people. As an Asian, Chen Ong naturally attracted everyone's attention. Everyone seemed to feel a kind of dramatic tension, and they sighed in unison because of regret. Oh! The dozen people behind Chen Ong were wrapped in black robes. 2 of them guarded the entrance of the tavern, the other 4 guarded the passageways that Locke might pass through, and the rest followed behind Chen Ong. Chen Ong found the seat in front of Locke and sat down slowly. No matter how calm and collected Locke was at this time, he couldn't help but be cautious. He quietly observed everything around him from the corner of his eye, and when he saw the young face of Chen Ong sitting in front of him, he was a little stunned and then relaxed. No matter who it was, being so young meant that he wasn't experienced enough, and it also meant that he wouldn't be difficult to deal with. So, he spoke first. "Are you looking for me?" Chen Ong replied slowly. "I'm looking for Imogen's subordinate, Half's right-hand man, an ancient Egyptian priest and sacred warrior." "Is he you, Locke?" Perhaps it was because Chen Eng's image lacked deterrence, but the tension he expected didn't show up. He looked at the man's slender neck and felt that he could strangle the man's neck with his strong arms at the first sign of conflict. Although the people hidden in the cloaks were very dangerous, there was a perfect hostage within his attack range. So Locke calmly asked, "What do you want?" "You don't have anything on you that I want. As you can see, I don't care about the little power you have, and I don't care about your master, Imogen. To be honest, I don't even believe that you are still loyal to him. No loyalty can withstand the test of 1,000 years. The Guardians can't, and neither can you." Chen Ong squinted his eyes and said with a smile, "I only care that you guys don't bring me any trouble, so I'm prepared to kill any possible variables before they sprout." He called for his men and placed a box on the table. He said to Locke, "If you are willing to obey me, this is yours." After saying that, he pushed the box over. Locke pressed on the box and his expression suddenly changed. He felt the weight of the box in his hand, but in the hands of the man next to him, the box didn't seem much heavier than a feather. Locke opened the box and it was filled with gold. There were 15 kilograms of gold bars and 20 kilograms of silver bars, shining brightly. His pupils suddenly shrank when he saw such a huge amount of wealth. He sneered and asked, "What do you want to buy from me?" Chen Ong said slowly, "Everything." Locke suddenly grinned and said, "But have you ever thought that I may not have to pay so much?" After saying that, he suddenly jumped up and overturned the table in front of him to block the man with a disheveled head next to him. At the same time, he closed in on Chen Ong and grabbed Chen Eng's neck with one hand. The tattoo on his body was green as if it was alive. The mysterious runes on the tattoo gave him more agility and strength. Seeing that he was about to grab Chen Eng's neck, he felt that one of his hands was pinched. His right wrist seemed to be locked by an iron hoop. He couldn't struggle at all. He only felt that the hand that grabbed him was as firm as a root. Locke turned around in surprise, only to see Chen Ong stretch out a hand and firmly grab his right hand. Seeing Locke's blank eyes, Chen Ong gently twisted and an indescribable force swept up along Locke's meridians. The twisted muscles and bones caused severe pain, causing Locke to involuntarily twist his body. However, the huge force that twisted his arm continued to exert force. Soon, Locke was twisted into a strange position. Chen Ong glanced at the tattoos on his body and suddenly gave an order to the vampire next to him. A vampire cut his wrist with his nails and sprayed blood on Locke. Chen Ong casually chanted a few incantations and the bloody power seeped into Locke's tattoo. It flowed on the surface of his body and gradually dyed the runes on it red. At this time, The vampire squad that went to control the other members of the priestly organization returned with the prisoners. Chen Ong let go of Locke's hand and let him go on his own. Just when Locke was about to resist, he felt a subtle force coming from the rune tattoo on his body, making him involuntarily follow Chen Ong to the car they came in. "Send him to the lab. I have something to ask him later," ordered Chen Ong casually. He asked some of the vampire squads to take turns escorting them back, while he took the other group to the governor's district in Cairo. If the dock area was a paradise for sailors and poor people from all over the world, then the governor's district was where the nobles and officials live. Not only was the security much better, but the environment was also much better than in a colonial city like Cairo. Western-style buildings were built here, and there were guards and police patrolling everywhere. There were also street lights and decorations on the roadside. Chen Eng's car drove smoothly into the governor's district. The guards and soldiers on the road saw the eye-like symbol on the front of the car and wisely didn't come forward to question them. Chen Ong easily drove the car to a manor where a banquet was being held. Chen Ong got out of the car and walked into the venue. He walked along the marble path into the banquet hall. The guard at the door saw the eye pattern embroidered on the collars of the black-robed men beside him. He quickly lowered his head and said, "The omniscient eye, the eye of the moon god. We will follow your instructions." Most of the people in the banquet hall were white Westerners and British and French dignitaries. They firmly controlled the power of Egypt through advisors and cabinet ministers of the Egyptian government. That was why, even though Egypt had become independent 2 years ago, Chen Ong still called it a colonial government. How could a government controlled by foreigners have the face to call itself the government representing Egypt? When Chen Ong entered, he attracted people's attention. He didn't hide his skin color, so someone immediately stood up and shouted at him, "Yellow-skinned monkey, this is not a place you should be. Guards, what are the guards doing?" He thought that his manly behavior would make him look taller, and the ladies in the banquet hall covered their mouths and giggled. Someone shouted, "Let him in. It's good to have some fun." The white man was even more furious. He jumped up and said, "These stupid and lazy cheese." Chen Ong gave the man in black next to him a look, and someone immediately went up to drag him away. The strong white man struggled and said angrily, "What are you doing? You be cheese." The man in black who was dragging him casually broke his neck, calmed his body, and dragged him out of the banquet hall. Everyone was stunned. Some of the noblewomen screamed and shouted, "Murder! Murder!" Chen Ong pointed at the crowd one by one. This, and this, make them shut up. I want to see most of the people here in the lab. The garbage in the dock area and the city have been cleaned up. Why isn't there any here? The governor's district's garbage accounts for at least 30% of the population here. There's such a big shortage of experimental subjects recently. What is Hong Fan doing? It's good to keep some useful people. What's the point of keeping so many useless people here? Now, come with me to meet the master here, Viscount Rosebery. Chapter 6:11. Sitting in front of the desk, Viscount Rosebery calmly tidied up his collar. He wore the traditional ceremonial attire of the British nobles and wore a wig. His face had the usual arrogance and harshness of an aristocrat. One could faintly see the affectation of a traditional aristocrat, but one could feel the awe-inspiring aura emanating from his body. He placed his hand on the aristocratic foil sword beside his leg. His eyes scanned Chen Eng's face and he suddenly sneered. He turned to the black-clothed vampire beside Chen Ong and asked, "Who are you, Your Excellency? Why do you treat my guests with such an impolite attitude?" Viscount Rosebery stood up from his seat and slowly walked to the side of the desk. This position was just right. He could use the debris to block most attacks and retreat to the back of the desk to resist at any time. Moreover, it was also very close to the window. If the situation turned bad, it would be convenient for Viscount Rosebery to escape at any time. This exquisite method was indeed the tradition of the British nobles. On one hand, they had to maintain their dignity, but on the other hand, they couldn't suffer any losses. Only a sly old fox like Viscount Rosebery could have such a refined pragmatism. It wasn't without reason that this country could colonize the world for hundreds of years. At this time, more than 10 British soldiers wearing bright red and white uniforms and tall black leather hats rushed over from the corridor. Viscount Rosebery quickly pulled out his foil sword. The tip of the sword was like a viper as it pierced through the throat of the black-clothed vampire closest to him. Even Chen Ong didn't expect that a pampered aristocrat would have such fast, accurate, and ruthless swordsmanship. The black-clothed vampire reacted quickly and quickly shrank back. However, Viscount Rosebery's sword tip seemed to have grown 3 inches out of thin air. With a slight flick of his wrist, the Baroque sword spun about and increased its speed by half a fraction, sending the tip of the sword straight into the vampire's throat. The sharp tip of the sword pierced through the black-clothed vampire's throat. The British soldiers quickly charged forward and prepared to support Viscount Rothbury. They attacked with their bayonets and formed groups of 2 or 3. They cooperated with each other and concentrated their strength on a single point. They were prepared to break through the blockade of the black-clothed vampires led by Chen Ong. From the looks of it, they seemed to have obtained the initiative, but Chen Ong didn't even spare them a trace of attention. He calmly walked to Viscount Rosebery's desk and thoughtfully flipped through some documents and reports. Viscount Rosebery felt an unusual movement from the tip of his sword. His expression suddenly changed and he shouted to the guards, "Be careful! They aren't humans." But it seemed that it was already too late. The Blood Klansmen in black pulled out a gleaming blade from behind their waist. Their bodies shot out at a speed several times faster than the British soldiers. They were like mysterious shadows that swept past in the blink of an eye. The scimitar in his hand drew a curve, and the British soldier's hands were pressed against his throat. Blood gushed out of his throat, and his corpse fell to the ground. His eyes were still filled with disbelief. This was almost a massacre. In the narrow corridor, a dozen or so vampires in black robes moved freely like shadows. The vampire whose throat was slit by Viscount Rosebery waved his scimitar and parried Viscount Rosebery's flower sword. The scimitar in his hand turned into a ball of snow-white blade radiance and slashed at Viscount Rosebery's vitals with the sound of tearing wind. At this time, Viscount Rosebery suddenly chanted a word. The silver ring on his right hand suddenly burst out with a dazzling holy light. The light flowed along his right hand and reached the foil sword. He suddenly pulled out the foil sword. The sword trembled rapidly like a flexible willow branch. Several sword flowers bloomed in his hand, and the holy light pierced the eyes of the vampire opposite him. Viscount Rosebery took the opportunity to raise his foil sword. A mournful shadow flashed, and it pierced the heart of the vampire opposite him. At this critical moment, Chen Ong kicked the vampire dozens of steps away. Then, his right leg shot up like a poisonous dragon and heavily slapped Viscount Rosebery's face. Like a ball, the vampire flew out and crashed into the wall behind him. Viscount Rosebery's neck crooked, and he actually fainted. Chen Ong slowly put down his right leg and sighed. "I haven't fought in a long time. My skills are a bit rusty." Glancing at the vampire he saved, Chen Ong coldly shouted, "Trash!" The Blood Klansman in black revealed an expression of extreme fear. He trembled under Chen Ang's indifferent gaze. At this time, the other Blood Klansmen in black, who had already dealt with the British soldiers, could only look at him sympathetically. Throughout the entire process, no one said a word. Chen Ong pointed at the relevant documents on the desk and said, "Put them away and search this manor for me. I want all the information on the Suez Canal Company, as well as all the documents related to Viscount Rosebery and the British mainland. Take everyone else away. Anyone who dares to resist will be killed without mercy." Although everything went smoothly, Chen Ang's expression didn't relax at all. He solemnly looked at the unconscious Viscount Rosebery and frowned. It wasn't because Rosebery was too strong and exceeded Chen Ang's expectations. On the contrary, the protection around Rosebery was too weak. Rosebery's strength wasn't inferior to Hong Fan's before he was strengthened. In addition to the dozen or so elite British soldiers protecting him, it was enough to contend against Hong Fan and Zhang Ziqiang together. If they weren't careful, the Samsara travelers might even capsize. But if this was the power around the Suez Canal Company's Egyptian director, it would be too ridiculous. As far as Chen Ong knew, the Suez Canal Company and the local church had always been on the same side. Rosebery had always been protected by 3 priests and several servants proficient in Indian yoga. There was also a team of black wrestlers with extraordinary strength and proficient in throwing. But Chen Ong didn't see any of these people today. But it didn't matter, Chen Ong thought to himself as he looked at Rosebery. When Rosebery also became a member of Horus's Eye, all of this wouldn't be a secret anymore. Chen Ong calmly withdrew from the manor with his men, leaving behind an empty building and many missing dignitaries. What happened today was like a boulder thrown into a pond. The country's dignitaries could no longer convince themselves to turn a blind eye to what was happening in Cairo. They had to face the changes that were happening. The huge power of Horus's Eye was like a sponge that slowly swallowed up the huge undercurrent. Their power and influence were like a bottomless abyss, quietly quelling the matter. The next morning in Cairo was still calm. When Zhang Ziqiang saw Locke and Rosebery, who were transforming into vampires, he laughed wildly. He said proudly, "What else can they use to fight me now? Dr. Terence, the second in command of the Pharaoh's mausoleum, is one of us. Locke, the second in command of the priests left by Imodin, is also one of us. Even the hidden force, the head of the Suez Canal Company, Viscount Rosebery, is one of us. We're already in an invincible position. When your tripartite plan succeeds and really triggers a team battle, we'll actually be the ones to give them the mission." "Ha! Let me ask you, is the Lord stupid?" Chen Ong asked with his head tilted. Zhang Ziqiang was stunned. "Of course the Lord is not stupid." Chen Ong said indifferently, "The Lord God isn't stupid. Would he leave us so many loopholes so that you can trick people whenever you want? I can guarantee that if you plan to let them go and indirectly control these tripartite organizations, the time when the reincarnators appear and the main mission will be beyond your imagination." Zhang Ziqiang was stunned. "Then why did you capture them?" Chen Ong said with a smile. "Do you think I'm weakening the other 2 parties? In fact, I'm increasing their strength." After Viscount Rosebery disappeared, the British learned of the relevant news, especially the existence of the Eye of Horus. They will definitely send people to regain the initiative. I believe that the force they send again will be much stronger than before, strong enough to obtain an absolute advantage. After the disappearance of Locke, the second in command of the Pharaoh's priests, I'm afraid that the first in command, Hafs, will not sit still. Coupled with the news about the city of the dead that I've vaguely revealed, he should immediately set off for Cairo. Cairo is our home ground. This time, converting Locke and Viscount Rosebery into vampires is enough to help us gain a considerable advantage in intelligence and further strengthen our infiltration of the other 3 parties. I want to eat all 3 parties and all the reincarnators in Cairo. I want to promote the Eye of Horus to officially establish a nation." Zhang Ziqiang was stunned. He said in horror, "Establish a nation? You want to control Egypt?" "That's right. We've done so much work in the mummy world. Is it just for a plot mission?" Chen Ong asked rhetorically. "According to our current intelligence investigation, take a look." He pushed some documents over. Zhang Ziqiang quickly read the titles of the document. Chinese warlords attempt to excavate Qin First Emperor, reporter personally experienced zombie attack. Legend of the Holy Grail and Knights Templar, Mayan crystal skull. Government of the United Kingdom has been sending people all over the world to investigate clues about the Ark of the Covenant. Investigation of Dr. Indiana Jones. Zhang Ziqiang's breathing quickened as he read on. He held on to the relevant information tightly, and then he heard Chen Ong reveal a big piece of information. I've locked onto the location of the Egyptian tomb where the Ark of the Covenant is buried. Zhang Ziqiang could not hold it in anymore. He roared excitedly. Then go and dig it. Why are we still waiting for that Imogen? The Ark of the Covenant is so much more advanced than the Golden Sun Scripture and the Necromancer's Dark Scripture. With the Ark of the Covenant, who cares about those Egyptian scriptures? That's at least an S-grade divine artifact, and it contains at least 10 stars of power. And then? Chen Ong asked rhetorically. Just Imogen alone is enough to kill you. Activate the side mission of the Ark of the Covenant? Do you think you can play with a god? Chen Ong placed his hands on the table and said slowly, even without all that, the Mummy world is still a main storyline world of the trilogy. There are still the Scorpion King and the First Emperor's tomb, which will span decades. It's worth waiting for. When it comes to managing power, what's more powerful than creating a country and controlling its development? Chen Eng's voice was like a demon tempting Zhang Ziqiang. Think about it as the center of the story, Egypt. If we use the Eye of Horus to establish an independent country in Egypt, how powerful will we be in this storyline? What side mission can't we complete? We can even use this as a springboard to go to China. To China. This voice was like an irresistible temptation. It immediately broke through Zhang Ziqiang's crumbling defense, and he immediately fell into this huge picture. Chen Ong did not think it was enough and continued to tempt him. After the Mummy is completed, the next storyline is the Mummy 2. The time is 1933. 13 years later, if the Eye of Horus succeeds in establishing a country and develops for 13 years, how much power will it accumulate? If Hong Fan really becomes a vampire, how much power will his descendants expand after 13 years? At that time, Xiu said that the main storyline of the Mummy 2 is the Ark of the Covenant side mission. If we want to activate it, is there any possibility of failure? The Mummy 3 is in 1947, 27 years from now. What about then? There's also the Indiana Jones side mission, and even the Mao Mountain Taoist story in China. This storyline world will be your home ground. Chen Ong asked solemnly, isn't it worth it for us to take a certain risk for such a great benefit? Chapter 6:12. The next morning, O'Connor took Evelyn to the British military airport in Cairo. At the door, there were already people from the Eye of Horus waiting. Under his lead, they went straight into the airport hangar without any hindrance. At this time, the First World War had just ended. Thanks to the war, aviation technology had developed rapidly, although it was still the old double-propeller aircraft. O'Connor thought they would take this kind of aircraft, split into dozens, and fly to the depths of the desert. But O'Connor saw a behemoth in the hangar. It was a German Zeppelin airship. The member of the Eye of Horus in front introduced it to them. This is the German military Zeppelin airship. After the defeat of the First World War, the Germans sold all their military equipment. This big guy just flew over from Italy a few days ago. The elders sent someone to buy it 2 weeks ago. O'Connell noticed that this airship was different from any other airship he had seen before. Its air sacs had been modified and were obviously 2 times larger. The material was also an unknown cloth that glowed with a luster. Its frame was made of a mysterious silver alloy. The mechanical structure and equipment on it made O'Connell feel that it was awesome even though he couldn't understand it. In just a few days, this airship seemed to have undergone a complete transformation. On the other side, Chen Ong was also introducing the airship to everyone. Its core components are almost all equipment brought from the God space by the Samsara travelers, including the core engine, 2 jet engines, radar, and anti-aircraft weapons. At the same time, I also used the British military's local factory to modify 4 electric-powered cannons and 2 buffer electromagnetic cannons. It has a certain attack ability. Of course, its shortcomings are also very obvious. It has poor resistance to bad weather and can't resist the storms and sandstorms in the desert. So we can only use magic to guard against this series of possible situations. Of course, this airship has a strong anti-combustion ability. Not only is the airbag made of fireproof materials, but even the hydrogen has been added with antioxidation and anti-combustion catalytic substances. At the same time, there is our fleet on the Nile River to meet them. In the desert, there is also our camel team of nearly 400 people, which has been set up in advance. From Cairo to the outskirts of the City of the Dead, we have people there. We can put in a lot of power at any time. The reason why we chose to take the airship is that it can carry a lot of cargo. Secondly, if the worst happens, we can bomb the City of the Dead in advance. It's carrying 2 tons of incendiary bombs and 2 tons of TNT explosives, as well as some other special explosives, Chunong said as he fired the silver bullets of blessing. Zhao Xiao Bolong, and company only brought a pistol filled with blessings just in case. As for the true combat force, they were the sanguine warriors with astonishing marksmanship and extraordinary strength. And every rookie in the Samsara team had 2 sanguine warriors protecting them. They were the true users of the blessings. When Evelyn and the others arrived below the airship, the members of Horus's Eye were moving some coffins and steel statues onto the airship. There were also some armed men wrapped in black cloaks standing by. O'Connor saw that the British soldiers were also helping to prepare and move the supplies. He said to Evelyn in a low voice, "It seems that they have taken control of the British garrison. That's why I told you not to try to ask the British ambassador for help." Evelyn looked at the British soldiers being casually ordered by Zhang Ziqiang in disbelief. She covered her mouth and said, "Are they really that lawless?" O'Connor replied with a solemn look, "In Cairo, the organization Horus's Eye has actually become so terrifying. Unless we leave this country, we won't be able to escape from them." Jonathan immediately took over the topic and mumbled with a grin, "But before we leave, we have to get rid of the bombs in our knees first. I don't want my sister to become a beauty with a lame leg." Hearing that, Evelyn's eyes dimmed a little. It wasn't until she saw Chunong that she shifted her attention and asked curiously, "Who is he? I don't think I've seen him before. Is he also a member of Horus's Eye? Why are the leaders of Horus's Eye? We've seen yellow people, and most of them are more like scholars, rather than powerful bigwigs or brutal warriors." Speaking up to this point, Evelyn suddenly remembered that when she was imprisoned, she saw Hong Fan kill an underground merchant in Cairo. She suddenly hesitated and added, "Of course, there are still a small number of people who are quite dangerous." Seeing a trace of fear on Chen Eng's face, O'Connor smiled bitterly and said, "Wasn't he the one who performed the bomb surgery? He's a key figure and the most dangerous one among them." Jonathan screamed, "We were unconscious at that time. I hope he didn't take advantage of my sister." Evelyn suddenly seemed to explode. She pinched the soft flesh of Jonathan's waist and twisted it 360 degrees. Jonathan suddenly screamed. Looking at Evelyn's skillful movements, O'Connor suddenly felt a shiver all over and a chill behind his head. The men in black who were attracted by Jonathan's screams invited them to the airship. The 3 of them were lucky enough to sit in the same cabin as the members of the Samsara team. Zhao Xiao Bolong and Li Mingyi were enjoying a rare leisure time. They were playing landlord in a circle. Since coming to the world of Samsara, Zhao, who only slept 3 hours a day, shouted with a note on her face, "Thank God, thank Earth, thank Doctor for giving us 3 days off. It's great to have no documents, no intelligence and no reports." Saying that, she actually cried, "I want to go home. I want to go back to work." Li Mingyi poured her a cup of milk tea and comforted her, "We're already lucky. Think about it, if we joined other Samsara teams, although we wouldn't have to work to the point of vomiting blood every day, our lives would be in danger every moment. How could we be like now, sitting on the airship playing landlord. Chen Ong didn't care about the pretentiousness of the newcomers. Now that the Eye of Horus was on the right track and its management was becoming more and more perfect, the value of the newcomers would gradually be unable to be reflected. Although the newcomers had made indelible contributions to the establishment of the Eye of Horus, the ruthless Chen Ong was considering how to squeeze the last bit of value out of them after discovering that they had lost their value. Casually designing a new experiment plan on the notebook, Chen Ong silently calculated, Lin Gang has completed the first part of the modification of the blood race virus. We can consider further research. As a test subject of the blood race virus, he can participate in further development and research, and dig deeper into the potential of the blood race virus. Hong Fan is a theoretical research sample of the blood race, so Lin Gang can be a practical and detailed research sample. Maybe he can develop a second-order upgraded version of the blood race virus and feed the overall research of the blood race. As for Xiao Bolong, Zhao Yingqi, Li Mingyi, Qian Xuanhou, and even Zhang Ziqiang, they can be the test subjects of other modification plans. In addition to the blood race virus, the perfect blood can also be divided into the werewolf virus. Qian Xuanhou can be a werewolf test subject for related research. In addition, the research of the holy power of the Vatican, the research of the Egyptian priests, and even the research of general theology are all very necessary. The powerful power feedback from the curse of Immoden is also very necessary to research this mechanism. There's also the power of the 5 elements that Qin First Emperor may have mastered, Ziyuan's spells, and the mutated scorpion power of the death bracelet. The research projects are endless. As he thought of this, he began to design an experimental plan in his notebook. The rookies sitting not far away from Chen Ong did not know that Chen Ong, who was deep in thought while holding a notebook, was customizing a human modification surgery for them. O'Connell and company, who were gathered together, felt a chill run down their spines for no reason. It was as if there was a malevolent aura surrounding them. Evelyn shrank her body and looked at the people around her vigilantly. At this moment, Chen Ong was thinking, O'Connor and Evelyn seemed to be the reincarnations of ancient Egyptians. Evelyn was an Egyptian princess in her previous life, and O'Connor was her guard, as well as the guard of Ra, the sun god. Since they could reincarnate and get entangled with Immoden again, does it mean that there's something we can start researching? Since Jonathan is so close to them, he should have some other background. Chapter 6:13. The Ghost Cutter Team has entered this world. The Ghost Cutter Team is in opposition to your mission. Every 30 minutes, the Ghost Cutter Team will be notified of O'Connor's coordinates. The Lord God's prompt suddenly sounded in the ears of all the team members. Zhang Ziqiang jumped up from the chair next to him. Except for the newcomers, who were at a loss, the 2 veterans were very nervous. Hong Fan cursed in a low voice, "Damn it, it's those Japanese." Zhang Ziqiang looked at Chen Ong nervously and asked in a low voice, "Is this what you expected? You seem to have said that we would only start the team battle after we resurrected Immoden." Chen Ong was still calm. He looked through the information in his hand and replied casually, "Yes. This is the obstacle that the Lord God has given us. It's one of the 2 biggest possibilities. I thought it would be a sandstorm. I didn't expect it to be an opposing mission." Zhang Ziqiang was surprised. "Why didn't you warn us in advance?" It was Chen Eng's turn to be surprised. He asked, "Why do you need to warn us in advance? What's our main mission?" "Escort O'Connor and Evelyn to the ruins of Hamunaptra, the city of the dead," Hong Fan replied. Chen Ong said lightly, "So? The process of completing the mission is like an outing? In fact, this main mission means that there will be obstacles in the process of our escort. It should have been the Pharaoh's Tomb Keeper organization, but in the first half of the mission, we have accumulated too much influence. It has reached the point where the Tomb Keeper organization can't threaten us no matter what. At this time, I guess the Lord God will have 2 choices. One is to issue an opposing mission and send another samsara team to cause trouble for us. The other is to create a huge sandstorm to attack us. The power of natural disasters is equally terrible. For this reason, I deliberately chose an airship that is vulnerable to sandstorms. Only in this way, when we encounter sandstorms or tornadoes, will it be enough to threaten us. If we encounter a sandstorm, the manpower and materials I have placed in other places in advance will be enough to get us through it. If we encounter a samsara traveler, this airship can become our logistics base. Chin Ong smiled and said, "Actually, the most troublesome situation hasn't happened yet. We should be glad." Hong Fan stared at him and asked, "What's the worst-case scenario?" Chin Ong said in a low voice, "The worst-case scenario is that the God Lord thinks that we have an overwhelming advantage. To balance out the strength of both sides, he sends the Samsara team and Sandstorm to attack us together." At this moment, Dr. Terrence in the cockpit reported, "There are signs of a sandstorm forming up ahead. The air pressure in the center of the desert is rapidly decreasing, and the airflow is abnormal." Everyone looked at Chen Ong with an expression that said, "You jinx." However, Chen Ong replied calmly, "Now the God Lord wants to separate us. If we parachute now, there will definitely be a high-altitude airflow that will blow us apart. If we let the airship land, it will take nearly half an hour. Then, the hostile Samsara team and Sandstorm will arrive together to attack us. They are in the dark, and we are in the light. We will be at an absolute disadvantage. If we continue to fly, we will encounter a sandstorm soon. When we are blown off course by the strong wind, we may delay the mission and miss the quiet period of the City of the Dead. The difficulty will increase greatly, and we may also be attacked by hostile samsara travelers when we are tired. The God Lord finally pays attention to us. Now, the Ghost Cutter team has the power to fight us." Suddenly reaching a dead end, Zhang Ziqiang felt very desperate. He opened the window of the airship, and a strong gust of wind poured in from the window. He could see a yellow torrent forming in the horizon. The yellow sand on the ground was rolling like a magnificent wave. It was only because the airship was at a high altitude that the sand did not pour in, but looking at the situation, this treatment would end soon. The next storm would have enough power to bring the sand hundreds of meters into the sky. Zhang Ziqiang roared against the strong wind, "You are just talking. Think of a way. You are going to get us killed." He looked at the huge sand wave gradually forming on the horizon. He watched the sand and dust in front of him rise into the sky, reaching thousands of meters into the sky. A grayish-yellow world was like a curtain slowly drawn, and the airship they were in was a small decoration facing this curtain. In the huge storm, the airship hundreds of meters long was as helpless as a small boat in the sea. Even the huge size of the airship could not give the people inside a sense of security. O'Connor held Evelyn tightly and shouted at Chen Ong, "Think of a way! You must have prepared for this, right?" Chen Ong slowly got up from the chair this time. He walked to the center of the airship against the strong wind and faced the open window. The strong wind passing through the cabin blew away everything that was not securely placed. O'Connor pulled Evelyn and had to lower his body to stabilize his center of gravity. Suddenly, he found that all the tables, chairs, and even the lighter decorations on the ground were fixed to the floor with wedges. Therefore, all the decorations in the cabin, except for the items they brought in later, were not blown away by the strong wind. O'Connor looked up in shock and said, "Everything was premeditated." "Yes." Chen Ong turned back and said, "Do you know what is the most reliable defense against a sandstorm? I said that there is a defense facility here. When you came up, I told you that when the airship encounters a storm, we can only use divine arts and magic to guard against this series of possible situations," Hong Fan and Chen Ong said at the same time. Zhang Ziqiang's face was distorted by the wind in the storm. He shouted anxiously, "If you have a way, do it now. Stop talking." Chen Ong took out a black leather book from his arms and flipped to the title page in the strong wind. He softly chanted a mysterious spell. Terence, who was in the cockpit, also staggered to the cockpit. Together with Chen Ang's gradually rising tone, he chanted the ancient Egyptian hymn in a low voice. At this time, the other men in black and the vampires in the cockpit also endured the strong wind and echoed. The high and low tones were divided into 4 parts like a symphony, alternately praising the gods and natural phenomena of ancient Egypt. Evelyn felt that she heard a familiar scripture, so she listened attentively. Seeing that she was listening attentively, O'Connor asked in a low voice, "What are they chanting?" Evelyn said absent-mindedly, "They are praising the gods. This part is recorded in the ancient books. This is the incantation that the pharaohs used to praise the god. It is said that it has unfathomable mysterious power. This is from a long-lost scripture, the Golden Sun Scripture. Its existence can only be proved by a few words scattered in many books of the dead. I have always suspected that this book was buried in the city of the dead. Now I am sure that they kidnapped us for this book. Oh my God! It really exists. It is this book that made me fall in love with Egypt since I was a child." Evelyn suddenly clenched her fists firmly. "We can't let the Golden Sun Scripture fall into their hands. This book should be brought to England by me. It belongs to all mankind." Jonathan, who was listening at the side, almost went crazy. He said crazily, "This is their solution? Praying to the Egyptian gods?" As he said this, he took out 2 things from behind and threw them to O'Connor and Evelyn. Evelyn took it and looked at it. It was a parachute backpack. Before Evelyn could question him, Jonathan replied, "I took it from there. Don't think about it, put it on." Evelyn was at a loss and asked in surprise, "What about the bombs on our feet?" Jonathan said anxiously, "Don't worry about your feet. If you hesitate any longer, you will die." O'Connell's eyes searched back and forth among the Samsara travelers, hoping to find signs of a signal transmitter. At this time, a voice interrupted them. Zhao rolled her eyes at them. "Don't waste your efforts. Now the storm below has formed. The chance of survival in the parachute is no better than in the airship." Jonathan and the other 2 thought for a moment and felt that what she said made sense. They turned around and hid in a place with shelter. But at this time, everyone was surprised to find that the wind in the cabin had weakened. Zhang Tai raised his head and looked out of the window. A more intense storm was forming. The storm with yellow sand was coiling around the airship like a huge dragon. This huge storm was so fierce that it seemed to have sucked away all the sand near the airship. Gradually, the space where the airship was became tranquil in a weird way. The storm was like a 1,000-meter-high wind wall blocking the airship. A corner of the blue sky appeared above everyone's head. A blue circle appeared above everyone's head. Around the circle were destructive winds and sandstorms. The thin barrier seemed to be on the verge of collapse. At every moment, people could not help but worry that the storm would break through the barrier and tear the airship into pieces. At this time, Chen Ong also stopped chanting. He put away the black leather book and said to everyone, "Okay. We are safe now." O'Connor looked at the wall that stopped the storm and said incredulously, "Is this magic? The safest place for hurricanes and tornadoes is the eye of the hurricane. In the model of wind fluid structure, the low pressure near the eye of the hurricane is the calmest place. No matter how powerful magic and divine power is, it can't directly fight against nature. But it's not difficult to take advantage of the wind and current. We will use the divine power to awaken a wind that belongs to our magic in the storm. Under my control, it will form a new fluid structure around us and drive the formation of the tornado. This super-large tornado will in turn become a barrier to protect us and keep the storm outside the airship. Now, not only will the storm not become our obstacle, but it will become our help." Chen Ong looked indifferent. He sat back in the chair and explained to the others.